Hey, we're back. It's Tuesday. Welcome to Twins Hangouts. I'm Jeremy Nygaard, joined by Seth Stills. Hi, Seth. How you doing?
Doing well, Jeremy. How are you today?
I am fantastic. We have a pretty full episode here today. We are going to be joined shortly by John Manuel of Baseball America, and later joined by Steve Boer of Twins Daily and Knuckleball's blog and Metro Sports Report and all sorts of different things. So. Let's get right down to it. I'm going to invite John in, and we will talk a little MLB draft. Obviously, John is all over that with Baseball America, so we're excited to have him in. The invitation is posted, and we'll just be waiting for him to join. As you guys may or may not know, the Twins have announced a few more signings. I believe there was 17 more that signed officially on Saturday, which brings the grand total to 24. And then there was a Twitter thing that was today that they agreed to terms with Jake Reed, which brings their grand total to 25 and 8 out of their first 10. So right now we're waiting for Nick Birdie, whose college career was recently completed, and it sounds like there's an agreement basically in place. He just has to pass the physical. And John Curtis of Texas, who is still playing in the College World Series. So we will talk to John about that. We'll have a lot of questions for him. If you have any questions, you can get those to us on Twins Hangouts on our Twitter account. You can leave them on Twins Daily, or tweet Seth or tweet myself. Also, look for us on iTunes. Download us. Leave us a comment or feedback or anything like that. We're all over on the iTunes, and you can also view the video on YouTube whenever you would like. Seth, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I guess real quickly before John joins us, the game in Boston is now complete. The Twins lose 2-1 to the Red Sox, to John Lester and his bullpen. Phil Hughes was terrific again. He went all 8 innings and gave up just 2 runs, obviously helping that Twins bullpen. But the offense has certainly been struggling. That's a topic I'm sure we'll talk about later in the show. Got shut out on Monday night and just 1 run tonight, which is Tuesday night. So yeah, we got some conversations to talk about. We also have some of the top prospects that I'm sure we're going to talk about throughout the show. A couple of them with some big home runs, a couple of good pitching performances. So we'll be sure to cover a lot of that. And as Jeremy mentioned, we always want your questions and hope you've got lots of them for us.
I'm trying to figure out why John is not joining us.
Patience, good sir.
Yeah, well, it's 2014. Things should be immediate, right?
Yeah.
Just like that. Boom, boom, boom.
The other thing we should talk about quickly, the Elizabethton Twins and the Gulf Coast League Twins will be starting this weekend or even later this week. So we'll talk about that as well. It's been fun, obviously, talking about the Twins, looking through their box score, but also being able to look at the box scores of all 4 of their full season affiliates. And now all those guys who have been kind of toiling away down in Fort Myers at extended spring training finally will get their opportunity in their seasons, the short seasons. And it's just basically a 2-month season, but it's always good to now follow 6 box scores every day. And, of course, there's double headers and things as well. So Jeremy and myself and Cody Christie and Steve Lean and Eric Pleiss, who do the minor league box scores, minor league reports each night, we'll have our work cut out for us over the next couple of months. But obviously we enjoy that and look forward to that.
Yeah, I guess we can talk about the other news of the day quick while we're waiting, and that is the news that kind of took me by surprise, and that is that Sam Deduno will not be making his start on Thursday. That's not the surprising part, but the surprising part is that Johan Pino, who's been in and out of the rotation in Rochester but has been fantastic this year, will be. Seth wrote a pretty thorough article about that earlier today or last night, and outlined the arguments for basically you could have for any of those 5 guys, and that Johan Pino got the call. So I think Seth was really excited. He probably jumped up and down a little bit, raised the roof, and did things like that because he was super excited. But what do you think about that move?
Honestly, I'm surprised, but I'm really glad that they did it. Johan Pino has been, well, aside from a couple of years, he's been in the organization since 2004 when he signed with the Twins. You look at all of these guys, obviously Alex Meyer and Trevor May are the prospects of the group. We've seen Logan Darnell real briefly, and Chris Johnson's been terrific in the International League the last couple of years. But if you just simply make this move based on stats, based on production, I mean, you can't look at Johan Pino's numbers and say he didn't deserve this opportunity. And for me, I'm excited. I think it's great. Even if it lasts just one start, I'm good with that.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are joined live right now by Baseball America / all things baseball guru, John Manuel. So if we could give you a round of applause, John, we would do that right now. John, how are you doing? Can you hear him, Seth? I can't hear him.
I can't either.
John, we can't hear you. I think John's going to keep working on that.
John, this is what the commercial is saying. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
No, I hate to do that, but yeah, hold on just a second.
John, we can hear you.
Just heard you.
I tried it with headphones. I don't think those worked. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. After the great introduction that I gave you, and then we had to wait 40 seconds to actually hear you talk.
That's the Google Hangout for you. We've done these every week for 2 years on the college baseball side, and the hardware sometimes can vex 42-year-old me. So I appreciate you guys being patient with me. But thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for joining us. Seth, I think you got question number 1, so why don't you give it a spin?
Well, I want to, first start out just introductory. I mean, I would happen to think if anyone listens to Jeremy or me, they know who John Manuel is. But, John, why don't you just take a minute and just talk about a little bit of what you do at Baseball America, and specifically as it relates to minor league baseball and obviously at this point, the draft.
Well, I've been at Baseball America for almost 18 years now, and so it's been almost half my life. So I've covered baseball from that scouting and player development point of view that we do all that time, and most of that was built around the amateur baseball. So I've always covered the draft in some shape, form, or fashion, and obviously it's taken on a little bit more of a larger role every year in our draft coverage. And then also did the Twins prospect rankings for us for, I think it was 8 years in a row. This past year was the first time I had not done it because I had to edit the whole book, which was a challenge, but editing the whole prospect handbook. But I did kind of miss doing the Twins list this year. Of course, I gave up the Twins in a year when they had Buxton and Sano and this ridiculous farm system, which, of course, both those guys have been hurt this year. But it would have been a fun year to write the Twins prospects. It would have been a funner year than the year that I had to rank Jose Majares number 4 or Nick Blackburn number 1. It would have been a funner year this year to do that than some of those past years where the pickings were slimmer. And then I guess the funnest parts of the gig these days is, I do a lot of these kind of things, radio, whatever, and I got to do the draft show with MLB Network, which was a lot of fun. Got a chance to work with Jim Callis, my old BA running mate, who's now at MLB.com. That was a lot of fun to get to work with Jim. Jim hired me at BA, so it was great to be on the draft show with Jim. And then I'll be on MLB Network. They've given me some neat opportunities. I got a chance to do 5 Fall League games last year on the network, and I'll do the AAA All-Star game coming up here in a month from Durham. So they don't have to pay me to travel, so that'll be cool.
That's great. I was just going to kind of ask one question as it does relate to the draft. But first of all, you did turn over that prospect rating to Mike Berardino, which I'm sure he's going to listen to this, and we're just thinking, man, why that guy? But no, he's been great. I mean, he's been a joy to have on the Twins beat the last couple of years, getting to know him. He's been on with us a few times. But, again, as we relate to the draft, one thing I wanted to ask you about that I think has really changed what's happened is this just to move the sign And even this year, is it just me, or are these guys signing even more quickly than they have the last couple of years?
Yeah, I think the basic part of that is that baseball scouts are good at their jobs. They do signability with all these teams, with all these players, and they know which ones are tired of being in school and which ones aren't. And the kids telegraph that to the players. I tell the players all the time when I see them in college baseball, you better watch what you tweet because every scout is following you. So 3 years ago, if you were a freshman, and I'll name one player, Tanner English at South Carolina, the first week he was at school, he tweeted basically every day how much he hated going to class. And every area scout knew it. And the team that had just drafted him out of high school, the Rays, knew it. Their scouting director and I talked about it. And, Tanner English would have had to have hit his way into the first round to get the money he wanted because everyone knew by the time he was a junior he was going to be ready to go. I mean, just ready to go. And all these players are. And all these players enter their junior year in college ready to go. And most of these high school seniors, if they've ever been a big deal at a showcase, they want to play. And it's very rare the top player who wants to go to school too. Yeah, I want more schoolwork. Yes, I want more classwork. Those guys are rare. That's just not every day. And the best players, the best players don't want to go to college in basketball. They only go to college in football because that's the way to train for the NFL. And they don't want to go to college in baseball either. So the pro scouts know that, and they've taken advantage of it. So they used to have some leverage because they had time. But in this system, it's the same thing, if I may sound like the leftist that I am, it's the same thing that's happening all over the country. All the power's in the hand of capital, not in the hands of labor. There's been a big shift in the last 30 years in America in terms of labor versus capital. And that's true in baseball, too. So people can't be surprised that the baseball union is not as strong as it used to be because this mirrors the trend in the country that unions are weaker than they used to be, and most of the power is in the hands of capital, not labor. I'll get off my political soapbox now and we'll return to our regular scheduled program already in progress.
Funny that you say that, John. As a teacher in Wisconsin, I know all about that. It's amazing.
Well, my sister's the. I'll give you two quick asides. First, my sister is the chairman of the school board in Wake County, 7th largest school system in the United States. So I get lectured on this from her all the time. Second of all, you mentioned Mike Berardino. Mike Berardino is the reason I work at Baseball America. When I was at University of North Carolina, I was dating Mike's younger sister.
Fantastic.
And he was working at Baseball America, and I had him be a guest on my sports radio talk show, Sports Rap, at WXYC in Chapel Hill. And Mike came on the show, previewed the baseball in 1994, as it happens to be baseball season. He previewed for us, brought me an almanac from the previous year, and was a great guest, as he is for you guys. And then, of course, was a correspondent at BA when I was working there, and we've obviously stayed in touch all over those years. So good guy, and he's the biggest reason he left Baseball America. I applied for the job. I didn't get it at that time, but I had my foot in the door and got the job 2 years later.
John, can I ask you a question? You brought up Tanner English, who was drafted by the Twins and is one of the guys that the Twins should have signed already that hasn't signed. What's the deal? Is he all of a sudden deciding he really likes school or what?
I think he's trying. I did not even remember that. I skipped over his name in my prep. I think that he's trying to pretend that he wants to go back to South Carolina, and South Carolina certainly is an attractive place to play because it is 8,000 seats and they fill it pretty much every night. It's a great environment. There's nowhere in the minor leagues that's going to be nicer than that. He's a BMOC at a school that they've had the last 2 years have been disappointing, but his freshman year they played in the College World Series finals. 2 years before that, they won back-to-back championships. So I think there's some pressure being put on him. I think he's being re-recruited. But for me, if he doesn't sign, it'll be a big shock if he doesn't sign. But you're right. He should have signed by now.
When you say he's the BMOC, that's only because Jadeveon Clowney's no longer on campus, right?
Well, there's that, but I mean, just anybody at University of South Carolina's baseball program is a big deal because their baseball program is a big deal. If you've never been to a game there, I mean, it is a big league atmosphere. I mean, There's several Southeastern Conference ballparks that are big league atmosphere. Arkansas, I've been told, I've never been there. LSU's #1. They've led the Division I in attendance like 15 years in a row. They get 10,000 people. And Ole Miss, Mississippi State. These are places where you're going to get 10,000 people sometimes, and it's loud. It's really so it's a letdown for those players when they go from the SEC to the low minors. It doesn't mean that It doesn't mean the SEC competition is better, because it's not. But it is an emotional letdown for some of those players. So it is easy for them to be re-recruited as juniors. But Tanner's a kid. I've followed his Twitter over the last 3 years. He does not like school, so he's going to stop. He just doesn't like school. Bottom line, and it's his fault for letting everybody know it.
I have a question, kind of draft in general. With all the seniors getting drafted, and the Twins didn't necessarily go the senior route in the top 10 rounds, but they went with guys that maybe were going to be easier to sign. Basically, they all signed under the slot recommendation. Is the draft the new system? Is it a broken system? And why isn't the draft hard slotted? And why don't they make the players declare for the draft?
Well, the three different questions, so remind me if I forget one of them. First off, I don't think the system is broken. I think the teams love it because there's no more draft signing bonus records. I've talked to a lot of teams and scouts about it, scouting directors, cross-checkers, and they all talk about it like it's almost like college recruiting. You know what your scholarship limit is, and you just have to go find players who will fit under your scholarship limit and players that you want. And that's what they go do, and that's how they treat it. They know what their bonus limit is. They know they put the players into a box of who they're willing to pay a overslot for and who they're not willing to. And the thing is, I think they figure out that it's fewer and fewer players that they're going to play overslot for. And I found like 6 college players last year who got overslot in the first 3 rounds. I mean, it just doesn't happen very often. They did. The slots are big. I talked to a general manager the week before the draft, and he said there's not a $6 million player in this draft. Well, right now we have 2. We'll probably have 3. Well, in previous drafts, we'd have multiple. 2011, off the top of my head, Dylan Bundy got more than that. It was a major league deal. Garrett Cole got $8 million. Danny Hultzen got almost that much, if not more, in a major league contract. Trevor Bauer probably got close to that. Archie Bradley got close to that. I mean, you had multiple guys getting over $6 million in one draft. It was a good draft class, but that just doesn't. It's not going to happen with the current rules. So I think the teams like the system, even if they game the system a little bit that way, even if it's artificial. I still think they like the system because they can. There's a little flexibility. You can go the senior route, or you can just go the straight route. The Giants generally go the straight route. They just take players off their board, and they generally don't take seniors. Just looking at the Twins list, Keaton Steele's a 4th-year junior. Randy LeBlanc's a 4th-year junior. They both have some medical issues, so they were able to sign them a little bit under slot and save a little money there, even if they aren't true seniors. And then as far as why they don't declare, that's a great question. I actually wrote a column that is in our College World Series preview issue that is free to be downloaded at baseballamerica.com about changes that I think could benefit both the draft and the College World Series. And the simple answer is move the draft to All-Star Week. Have it on one of the days during All-Star Week, maybe the day after the All-Star game so that it doesn't detract from the All-Star game, which I think is a real concern for Major League Baseball because of what the All-Star game means to their sponsors. It's a big deal for their sponsors, for their corporate partners, to really treat them really well. We as fans may not care about it as much. But the corporate sponsors do get a lot of free stuff out of that, so that's something that I should not minimize. But if you move to the day after the draft, for example, all amateur baseball would be over for that draft year, and then you actually could have, I think if you had a combine in that situation, you had the first week you had a high school combine, the next week you had a college player combine. Then players could go drug tested, height and weight, evaluated, throw a bullpen if you're a pitcher, BP in and out if you're hitters, those kind of things, infield and outfield drills. And then you get evaluated, and teams have had the whole spring to look at you, and they tell you where you're going to go, roughly. and how much money, if a team's going to, and then you have to, and then you do declare, and then it would be hard slots. But there's not enough information for the teams right now, or for the players, when you get drafted in your season, where I would be comfortable having completely hard slots and having a system where you have to declare. This is something that Major League Baseball needs to think about, but and put some real thought into. But that's the sketch that I put in that column, and I think that we're headed that way. To be quite honest with you, I think baseball is starting to realize that 40 rounds is an anachronism. Having its draft in the season is anachronistic, and if you want to actually market your draft and make your draft a big deal, you can't have it start at the same time as a bunch of your major league games. It's just silly. It doesn't make any sense. And they're not going to move it to the off season. I don't think they're going to have a January draft again like they used to. To me, you have to try to, if you want to grow the game, they need to try to do it in concert with college baseball. But I say that as someone who cares about college baseball, even though you are making me miss a College World Series game right now. But that's okay. I probably would have just fallen asleep because those games, the ballpark there is very sad. It makes me very sad.
That's a really new ballpark, though, right?
It's 4 years old in its fourth year, and it's too big, and they built it the wrong direction, so the wind blows in more often than not. So they haven't had a home run yet. They're in their 8th game, and they have not had a home run yet. So, and they had 4 all year last year, I think, in the whole series. It's just it's dead ball baseball, and Honus Wagner and Ty Cobb ain't walking through that door, so it's not as good as dead ball baseball was.
John, how about
go ahead,
talking about the draft? The Twins, when they picked 5th overall, they had their choice really between, we assume, Aaron Nola, and then Alex Jackson and Nick Gordon. And I guess just a simple, since we don't want to take, we've got about 5 minutes left. Did they make the right pick?
They made the right pick for them. I know they were extremely comfortable with Nick Gordon. I think that we like Alex Jackson's bat a little bit better, but the position value part of it, Alex Jackson, the short version, since we're running low on time and I went too far before, the short version is Alex Jackson's kind of a Will Myers type. So Will Myers was a 3rd-round pick, and one of the reasons was that he fell was, one, he wanted a lot of money, but number 2, no one was quite sure where he would wind up playing. And that's the thing with Alex Jackson is most traditional scouts say you don't take a position switch guy in the first 5 or 10 picks. So I think the Twins weren't comfortable taking Alex Jackson unless they really thought he was going to be a catcher. And I think the consensus is that the bat will move him to the outfield. So are you taking a high school outfielder 5th overall, or would you rather have a high school shortstop? And then the other part of it, I think they're really convicted on Nick Gordon. I know we had a great interview with the team, great individual workout for the team. Just talking to Twins sources before and after the draft, they were very high on Nick Gordon's makeup, and he's got 6s across the board on the scouting card, with the exception of power. And the Twins do believe in the power, and I know there were some mixed reviews on the power. But I've talked to scouts myself who believe in Nick Gordon's ability to impact the baseball, and I personally don't think the Twins are really ever in on Aaron Nola as anything more than as a backup plan. I think he was everybody's backup plan on the first 6 picks. And, the Phillies were hoping for someone else, and they wound up with Aaron Nola at 7. Not that Aaron Nola's bad. He's good, but I think he's a slightly better version of Mike Leake with a firmer fastball, but I think that kind of sells Mike Leake short. I think Mike Leake's pretty good myself. So if Aaron Nola's as good as Mike Leake, I think he'll be actually a little bit lucky because it's hard to be that good.
I think my opinion of Aaron Nola went up when I watched the Hangout that you and Aaron Fitt did, where Aaron
loves him.
It was like he might be the greatest thing ever, and I got excited.
Aaron gushes about Aaron Nola, that's for sure. I think it's the shared first name, but yes. But Aaron Fitt's more of a believer in Aaron Nola than I am. We'll put it that way. I think Aaron Nola's really good. I'm a big Mike Leake guy, and so early in the draft cycle when I compared Aaron Nola, I asked a scout to compare Aaron Nola and Mike Leake, and we went back and forth. That guy was like, yeah, I can't really say that that Nolan will be a whole lot better than Leake, maybe a half a grade better. That's not good enough for me at 5. Right. Mike Leake went 8th in a draft, I guess, and he's a 4th starter on a playoff team. Do I really think Aaron Nola is going to be more than a fourth starter on a playoff team. I don't know. I'm not convicted. Maybe a third starter, but I'm totally not with Aaron Fitt on that one. Aaron's on an island. He's the only one who thinks that Aaron Nola is going to be a 1 or 2, but that's okay. Aaron's entitled to his opinion.
Can I ask you quickly what your opinion is on the Twins and their basically recently their desire to draft a lot of
college believers?
Yeah. What's the deal?
It's curious. It's really curious. I think that this was a draft where there were high school pitchers with a lot of velocity out there.
Yes, there were.
And they passed on them several times. Sean Reed Foley sticks out to me as a guy who fell. And, you know, I guess they did not feel Sean Reed Foley was worth the money at 46, where they took Nick Burdi ahead of him. I don't know what else to say there. I have not had a chance to ask Darren Johnson that one, or Mike Ratcliffe, or anybody else with the Twins. That's the one. That's the pointed one I'll ask. I'm hoping to see them. You know, Tournament of Stars is this week. That's the USA Baseball's 18 and under selection program. So there are 108 high school players here this week. So I'll be out there tomorrow morning at 10. And I'm hoping there'll be a lot of scouts there. And if I see DJ, that's the first thing I'm going to ask him. Sean Reed Foley. Why just skip over Sean Reed Foley? Because I thought that you could get high school pitching velocity later in the draft if you wanted velocity. That said, Nick Burdi and Michael Cedroth were the two hardest throwers in college baseball this year. I talked to a scout who saw Nick Burdi 102 himself. So Michael Cedroth's up to 100 miles an hour out of the bullpen. So if you want velocity, those were the two guys to take. But then Sam Clay, Jake Reed, John Curtis, 3 more, Keaton Steele. I don't know. I'm not a scout, but I thought that was curious. I don't always think it's a great idea to go to the same demographic over and over and over again in a draft. I think variety is the spice of life. So I do like Sam Clay. I will say I like Sam Clay. I saw him good this year from Georgia Tech. He's athletic. He's quick-armed. He's got 2 good pitches with the fastball and the slider. It would not shock me if Sam Clay were athletic enough to start, but he doesn't have as clean of a delivery as even Corey Williams did a couple years ago, and Corey Williams has already had surgery, and he never got converted to starting. So, you know, Luke Bard had that conversion, didn't go well. He's never stayed healthy. Madison Bower, Summers, you know, all these college guys, you cannot convert Nick Burdi. That's ugly arm action. Right. Michael Cedroth, maybe. He tried starting at San Diego State. They got a little impatient with him and put him in the bullpen. He was so good in the bullpen. I could see the Twins trying him. I could see them trying Jake Reed, who started earlier in his career at Oregon. But Jake Reed's stuff was kind of meh as a starter. It jumped up at the bullpen. Right. John Curtis, I hear there's talk of John Curtis. So, you know.
We talked this week, John, about this, and on an individual pick-by-pick basis, we have no problem with the guys that they took. We just didn't understand the overriding theme because, I mean, I think I agree with exactly what you said. You know, the variety makes it more interesting. I mean, at the end of the day, it may work great or it may completely flop, but it just didn't make sense. And then just FYI, I saw the rotation for Elizabethton. Michael Cedar is going to be starting at least to start with, so we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, one of the guys in the office just emailed me that. We're hoping, you know, we're partial to Matt Batts, the 17th rounder out of UNC Wilmington. He interned for us last summer. He was a Colonial Athletic Association Pitcher of the Year this year. He's a wonderful dude. I hope he's is he doing that? Is he doing the journal for you guys, Seth?
I was going to ask if we could get a reference to.
He's a stud. No, he's a stud. He's a great guy. Big Braves fan. Don't hold that against him. But he's just a great young guy, and I'm really hoping that thing. I'm praying that he plays at Elizabethton this year because then I'll get a chance to go see him in the Appy League, and we will go see him because I never got a chance to see him pitch for UNC Wilmington. So I would love to go see Matt pitch in person, and but I mean he's more typical like old school Twins. He pounds the strike zone, he's got a good changeup, good breaking ball, throws it for strikes, 84, 88, you know. But yeah, I mean, it was a weird draft. There's no doubt, and I definitely expect some of those guys to get a chance to start. Cedroth, Curtis, and Reed. and make the most sense. And then possibility of Clay, but it sounds like Clay, really clicked this year as a reliever. So he's probably. I think he has a chance to move pretty quickly. Actually, Sam Clay. But he and Cedaroff, they don't even throw a lot of strikes. That's the weird thing. Those guys walk a lot of guys. Cedaroff was 5.5 per 9. Clay was more than 4.5 per 9 in college. So I don't know. I personally I didn't love their draft. But I do like Nick Gordon. I thought they overdid it. I think at some point you have to go off your board if all you're doing is drafting college. But you know what? We all criticized them years ago when all they did was draft the Kevin Sloweys and Brian Dunsings and the Nick Blackburns and the touch and feel guys. They got criticized for that, and they probably think it's unfair to get criticized for drafting velocity, but there has to be a middle ground somewhere.
Well, and I guess the one thing, because I had asked them basically those same questions afterwards, and the thing that I got was that it wasn't by design. It's just kind of how it fell. And then after rounds 5, you can't take high school guys because
they're hard to sign.
Right. So then it just became the best guy on the board or the guy that they, like the most, and they just happen to all be college relief types. So I don't know. I was asked point blank by one guy to give a letter grade to it, and I just totally skirted the issue and said, "Give me 5 years," because I wasn't comfortable, giving him a C- or a D+. But
yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody. I think it's very rare that anybody fails the draft on draft day. The worst, if you're grading, which I think is a futile exercise, is to give a grade, right after the draft. But yeah, it would not be one of the ones that I'm more excited about. That's the best way I can say it. I mean, the upside of this draft, really, like, who's a likely all-star out of this draft? Nick Gordon, and that's where things usually go. So really, to me, most of this draft rests on Nick Gordon. Right. And the rest of the value in this draft is going to be in the first 5 years of the draft, because that's the track record of college closers. The history of college closers the last 10 years, it's mixed. And the guys who've been the most successful guys have a short shelf life. Chad Cordero, David Ardsma is the one who's had a longer career but never had a big peak. Houston Street is the rare guy who's had a long career. But like Ryan Wagner, zoomed to the big leagues, didn't last. And then you have a lot of busts like Danny Moscos or Royce Ring or Casey Weathers or these kind of guys. I mean, if you're lucky, you get Drew Storen or Chad Cordero. Yeah, if you're lucky. And those guys were first-rounders. Like Drew Storen was the 10th overall pick. Sam Clay is at 110, Jake Reed's at 140, Cedaroff 79, Birdie 46. I mean, I just think that outside of Gordon, and maybe Max Murphy, who's a kind of a personal favorite of mine. I think Max Murphy's in the Twins parlance, a cheap 5-tool guy. Guy could do a little bit of everything. College center fielder, probably more of like a Reed Johnson type, right-handed hitting, probably a platoon outfielder who maybe can sneak into center field, but is more of a corner bat. So I guess in Twins parlance, is kind of more of like a Dustin Moore type of player, if I could use a name from 10 years ago. That wouldn't be bad. If you got Dustin Moore in the 9th round with Max Murphy, that wouldn't be bad. That'd be pretty good. So, but yeah, the only projected regular in this whole draft is Nick Gordon. And he's really the only realistic chance, because the rest of these guys profile as relievers or role players.
How high do you think Birdie makes it this year?
Well, I mean, I think that he's obviously done with Louisville. They just got eliminated, but I guess there's talk that he was already going to sign today. For me, Nick Birdie, there's nothing stopping him. But he was erratic at the end of the year. And his velocity, the 100s that we heard earlier, it was like 95, 96 late. He dropped. It's nice to have 7 miles an hour to spare. He did. Sure. But, early in the year, we had reports that he was throwing a 90, 91 mile an hour slider, touching 93. Didn't hear that, didn't see that late in the year. So I think it's possible that he could be in the big leagues by the end of the year. That's probably why they drafted him at 46 and not Sean Reed Foley, because they thought that he could help them this year.
Perfect. Because go ahead, Seth.
No, I was just going to say we told John we'd have him on for 15 or 20 minutes, and we're already at a half an hour, so we should maybe one more you can ask, and then we're going to let him go. He's an hour later than we are.
So I get one more question?
Well, it's up to you. It's up to John, actually.
Now hit me.
Okay, Roberto Gonzalez. What do you think?
Well, I'm not as versed on Roberto Gonzalez, but I do think that he's one of the more interesting guys they took. I mean, well, number one, Orlando was really good this year. For high school baseball, that was as good as it got this year. The whole country, basically Orlando and San Diego. Number two, he kind of reminds me of a lot of the other taller, athletic outfielders they've taken in recent years. I guess he's only 6 feet tall, but he seemed described as a long strider. Number three, I know our guy, Clint Longnecker, who's our draft guru, really handled the Southeast this year. He was pretty high on Roberto Gonzalez, and Clint actually bird dogged that area for the Toronto Blue Jays for 2 years before he came to work for us. So if he was high on Roberto Gonzalez, it wasn't just the scouts he talked to, which he talked to many about him. It was also about his individual. He put eyes on this guy, and then reported back to his boss, his area scout. So, but I will say you never like to see a scouting report about a high school outfielder that says questions about his contact rate. So that's, I don't know if I'd say, well, that's why he went in the 15th round. So that's probably the only guy you can really see the Twins going over slot for.
Well, he's signed already.
He is signed?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought I saw something on Twitter about that today, but I needed a little time after the draft. I've made a conscious effort. I'm checking signings about twice a week, and I'm not going to sit there and battle Jim Callis and Chris Cotillo every night for who got what draft signing. I'm happy to report some of them, but I can't obsess over it. I got to have a little bit of a life. I got to have a little bit of a life.
Fair enough.
That's why I'm doing this hangout at 10:30 on a Tuesday night.
Well, we appreciate that.
Sleep?
Yeah. But I appreciate you guys having me on, and I enjoyed it, obviously. I don't mind talking.
Wow, we appreciate you as well. Keep up the great work. Obviously, we'll be in touch, and maybe we can do this a couple of times a year because hopefully we'll last and more people will listen to us. Yeah,
give us a holler, and give me a holler anytime. We'll see how often we can do it. But thanks for having me on, and I'll tell Berardino I said hey.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, John.
All right, guys. Take care.
We're not very good at limiting our conversations with people to the time that we say we're going to limit them to, are we?
Yeah, but how? I could listen to him for 2 hours.
I know, I could too. I was thinking the same thing, but I'm like, he's never going to want to come on again.
But yeah. It was awesome, though. That was a lot of fun.
Great. Okay. I'm glad he was willing to do that.
I'm gonna invite Steve in, and we can talk more draft as we have more time at the end. But that was interesting. I liked his take on. He used the exact same word that we used. It was curious. It was a curious draft.
Right. Yeah, we really emphasized that last week that, we didn't, and you said it perfectly, I think, last week, but I think we're both in agreement that it's not so much that the individual players are worth being picked where they were picked, it's just all of them. And then I think part of the reason we're so excited about Roberto Gonzalez as a 15th round pick and an athlete is because he was the first high school kid they took between rounds 1 and 15. So, to me that was pretty exciting.
Right, absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a warm round of applause for our Cedar Rapids consultant / expert, Steve Boer.
Yay!
I'm looking at myself as sort of the underslot guy. I think you probably had to go overslot to get John, and then that senior that really doesn't have any other options that you can get for underslot. That's me tonight, I think.
Yeah, but every once in a while you get Mitch Garver in the 9th round, and he does all right.
Yeah, we could hope.
We'll see how it goes. So are you enjoying your All-Star break?
This probably comes into the category of too much information, but no, not really. I had that procedure done that people my age are supposed to have done every 10 years. That's how I spent yesterday. the first day of my All-Star break. So I've had better All-Star breaks.
Good. I don't know where to go there, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Already you want me to just turn this sucker off, don't you?
No, I'm sure this is great.
Where's the dump button? Especially for this particular case.
So, this isn't quite the same team that you saw in the Twins' first season in Cedar Rapids, is it?
Not really, no. Last year at this time, I think half the Western Division All-Star team were Colonels, and this time there were three representatives. One of them landed as a pitcher on the DL, relief pitcher. One of them is Brian Haar, who did get in the game late. I see actually went 1 for 2 in the game, and the third one was Cole Stewart, and the West Division used 11 or 12 pitchers, and none of them was named Cole Stewart. So at least I missed the last out or so of the game, but I'm assuming that didn't get in there for that. So
they went with 3 guys in the 9th, and none of them was named Cole Stewart. So
yeah, and it's too bad because the Twins and the Colonels did accelerate his start, moved it up to Saturday instead of Sunday so that he could throw an inning. But apparently the teenagers are coming at the bottom of the list of pitchers for the All-Star game. But no, it's certainly not the same team. Not that we expected it to be, but I can't really say that the season has gone as expected either.
One thing I know that you and I think others have kind of chimed in on it on Twitter is, the fact that the has been such a match. I think a lot of people thought that, when it comes to prospects, the pitching is where the prospects are. But in reality, those prospects were really young, 19, 20-year-olds, whereas the hitters are the veteran 23, 24-year-olds. So maybe we shouldn't be as surprised. I mean, what are your thoughts on that topic?
Well, hindsight's 20/20. So I guess when you expect the pitching to be really good and you expect the hitting to be your Achilles heel, and then it turns out, at the All-Star break, you've got the second best batting average in the Western Division and the second lowest ERA or whatever, or second highest ERA, second worst ERA. You start looking for reasons why that might have been the case, and I guess that explanation sounds as good as any, right?
Works for me. So just kind of going back then to the pitching, obviously, I think it's fair to say we expected a lot maybe from a 19 or 20-year-old Felix Jorge. I think we expected Ryan Eads as a second-round pick just last year out of a big-time LSU SEC powerhouse to, even if he wasn't an upper echelon pitching prospect, to be a little better than having a 6.5 ERA halfway through the season. Aaron Slegers has an ERA over 5. It's kind of been Cole Stewart, and then what?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, Slegers got off to a nice start. I think, he had 4 or 5 starts back in April, first part of May that weren't too bad, and then had a few clunkers, which really sent his ERA skyward. But I would imagine that Eads would tell you he's as disappointed, if not more disappointed, in the way his year's gone as anybody is. Yeah, maybe it was unreasonable to expect a lot out of Jorge, but I don't know. Did we expect any more out of him than we expected out of Stewart? And Cole seems to be doing all right. So I don't know if it was unreasonable given the kind of pedigree that those guys were supposed to have. It's been disappointing, though, obviously.
But at the same time, now you look towards the second half here, and I mean, you do have Stewart. You do have now Fernando Romero and Lewis Thorpe. Now, these guys are really young. I think Thorpe's the youngest in the league, and I think we should expect him to probably struggle. I mean, the thing that surprised me is in 8 2/3, he's got 7 walks and just 2 strikeouts. I mean, that might just be the fact that he's pitching against guys that are 4 or 5 years younger than him. But, I mean, at least in terms of prospects, there are still some guys there.
There are, and you certainly would hope that a guy like Thorpe would turn things around. I've seen his 2 starts, and in both situations, he got through a couple innings, maybe even 3, without doing too badly, and then hits the 4th inning, and maybe he gets cheated on a strike, and you walk a guy, and all of a sudden he's throwing like 30 pitches in the 4th inning, and there goes his day. So he's going to need to figure out some way to break through that 4th inning barrier if he's going to stick. And I mean, if he doesn't do any better than what he's done in the first couple of starts here in his first couple of the second half, I think you'll probably see him go back down to E-Town where he can get his stuff together. But Romero is off to a good start. You still got Gonsalves that could come up yet the second half. And so I guess if you want to look in the silver lining department, if the pitching, particularly the starting pitching, can get things together, the fact that the hitting is holding up real well maybe gives you something to look forward to in the second half.
Steve, can I just ask you quickly, which player has impressed you the most? Maybe not necessarily the best prospect, but the guy that's exceeded the expectations that you had for them coming into the season?
It's probably going to sound like homerism, but I think the Cedar Rapids native, Chad Christensen, probably would qualify for that. When I was down in spring training the last week or so before they broke camp, I talked to Jake a little bit about Chad, and at that point, it wasn't at all certain that Christensen was going to come north with him. Jake told me at the time that he was hoping to get Chad to, convince the powers that be to let Chad come north with him because he really liked his flexibility and the fact that he could play so many positions, and he kind of figured on this ball club he was going to need that sort of flexibility. Well, Chad did come up with him. He didn't start. He was not in the starting lineup the first night, opening night. And now the guy's hitting, 295 or something, and is up at or near the top in a lot of offensive categories. So he's probably been the biggest surprise. Garver has been the best offensive ball player, top to bottom, I think. I just don't consider that a huge surprise. I had some pretty high hopes for Garver for Mitch as the season, as it opened up.
Yeah, and I mean, as you know, I was in spring training for like a week, 8 days. I saw Garver and thought he was pretty impressive, but he was getting a lot of time at first base working with Tom Kelly, as was Chad Christensen. So, I'm not really surprised with Garver. Christensen, he's one of those guys that probably will consistently be undervalued because of his versatility. But, I mean, he fills up the stat. I mean, he's got 18 stolen bases in 22 attempts. I mean, he's just kind of doing a little everything. And as a guy who really is a Johan Pino type of fan and was underrated, guys that don't get all the credit, I like hearing about Garver and I like hearing about Christensen. At Twins Daily, you wrote today about Jason Kanzler, who's another guy who's just doing a little of everything. He actually did start the season at extended spring training. We know about the defense, but he's done a little bit with the bat too. So, I mean, talk a little bit. What was the most interesting thing? I know it was quite the interesting tale you told Daily. And by the way.
Yeah. Jason is an interesting dude. He is. I think the best word to use him on the field anyway is intense. He is an intense competitor and an intense young man on the field. And I wasn't really sure what to expect. It was really the first time I'd talked to him for any extended period of time. We visited for about 15 minutes. As I've mentioned in the article, I started out by saying something to the effect of, you were one of the last guys that were left off the roster, coming, and I got about that far into my question, and he stopped me short, and I was the last guy. He made sure I was the last guy. And he didn't say it with a smile. He wasn't, some guys is, oh, ha, 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 but look, it's turned out with, no. Dead stare, and I was the last guy. I said, so how'd that make you feel? I was angry. I was really angry. So he's one of those guys you can tell he's got a little chip on his shoulder. He has been underappreciated, or that's his perception of himself. He got cut from his first college team after 2 weeks. It took him a while to catch on at a second college. He's been told he can't do things so often that he just really is enjoying proving people wrong. And he's again another guy that's hitting 290 something right now. So he certainly would have to count as one of the guys that I think has been a pleasant surprise for the Colonels this year.
The other one that kind of impressed me, but I was absolutely shocked when he was on the Colonels roster to start the season, and then later after an injury, I was surprised he remained on the roster, and that's Angel Vilma. I'm sure I said that wrong, but you can correct me. I mean, what I saw was a guy who was tremendous at both second and short defensively, strong arm, long, good arm, all that kind of stuff, but really young, but he's held his own. I mean, for being so young and so raw, I mean, it seems like he's held his own. I mean, he's hitting 260, so he's not putting up great numbers, but I certainly wouldn't have expected that.
Yeah, I don't think he comes north with the Colonels if Walker doesn't get hurt, midway through March.
Right.
When Walker got hurt, they needed a shortstop, and I don't know. Vilma's a lot of things, but right at the top of that list is shortstop. He is about as smooth at that position as anybody I've seen in a very long time. You don't worry about whether he can make the routine plays. You don't worry about whether he can make the difficult plays, and he makes it all look so very easy. He's not a very big guy, but that first few weeks of the season he didn't hit, and you did get the feeling that if Walker could get back up there before too long, that Vilma would be sent back to extended pretty quickly. But he started making pretty good contact, barreling up, and the ball started falling a little bit. Got good speed, and now when Walker did join, Vilma wasn't going anywhere. So he's been a lot of fun to watch. I told Terry Ryan when he was here, I talked to Terry a little bit, and I said, after I got done with the interview, I said, I got to tell you, I'm just having a blast watching Vilma play baseball. So that's just, he's that kind of guy. He's a lot of fun to watch.
Zach Larson's the other guy. He's been hurt now for at least a month. He's the other guy. We had him on here a month ago or so, and then he got hurt. So
he pulled his hamstring, so watch your hamstrings tomorrow.
Yeah, that's probably the least of your concerns right now. But I think is what you would call a prospect at this stage.
Yeah, he's sort of overlooked at this point because he hasn't been on the field for a few weeks. But you're absolutely right. He did get off to a good start. And again, if you want to look for a silver lining, you've got 4 or 5 guys that should be coming off the DL here before too long, and Larson is certainly one of them. Wade is another guy that will be coming off the DL. Pineda, I believe, is down in extended now, getting some swings in. It's going to be a really crowded outfield pretty soon, frankly. They're going to have some really tough decisions to make. I'm hoping a couple of those guys maybe get promoted as opposed to being sent down, because when you start looking at most of the guys that have been playing the outfield, plus a couple of these guys coming back off the DL, there aren't many of them that I'd say don't deserve to be at this level.
Well, let's remember that Tyler Grimes, and I know you got along with him well last year, and I had a 15, 20 minutes with him. Great guy. He's playing center field right now for the Fort Myers Miracle every day. And Hansler or somebody moving up.
Yeah, I love Tyler. You're right. I got along with him great last year, and he's a really good guy. But I would not put center field at the top of the list of positions where he ought to be playing baseball.
Jeremy, you got a couple?
Well, I was going to ask Steve something that we had talked about earlier before our show. So if you want to talk about your next bullet point there, then I'll come back to mine after that.
Well, let me ask this one first, and kind of more informational for those that are listening as well. Next weekend, as in the 27th, 28th, the Colonels are having their Twins weekend, and I know on that Saturday night, Rod Carew will be there, TC will be there. I know the organist from Target Field will be there. Kind of a lot of Twins-themed events going on next, and I know I'm going to get down there. At least I'm trying to get down there. I haven't finalized anything, but I think if anyone's got the opportunity, Cedar Rapids is 3.5, 4 hours. I think
Yeah,
Steve.
you're going to count on 4 to 4.5 probably.
All right, I only made it twice last year, but and then you can make it stop in Dyersburg and hit that Field of Dreams. There's a lot going on down there besides just Colonels baseball, but it's a quick trip. If you get a chance, you'll get a chance to see maybe some of these pitchers or, make your own impressions, which I think is always great. So, I mean, anything else you'd kind of throw out there for that Twins weekend?
I got to be honest. I haven't looked at what they've got for a schedule this year. I know last year Tony Oliva was down here along with the others, and Tony was at the game. He also, and I wish I had looked at the schedule to see if they're doing this again, but last year on Saturday morning they had a charity benefit breakfast, like a pancake breakfast or something, where Oliva and some of the players, and I don't remember if it was Jake or Tommy or somebody, attended the breakfast as well and talked for a little bit. It was real reasonable in terms of price, and there was a silent auction and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know if they're doing that again, but it's a very intimate sort of small group, a good opportunity to get a chance to have a conversation with, for some of us, our boyhood heroes. It was a great time last year, and I'm looking forward to it this year as well.
Let me kind of add to that. I know that on Friday night, the 27th, is one of your favorite nights, Steve, who, by the way, if you follow him on Twitter, it's @JimCricket, so be sure to follow him there as well. I know one of your favorite nights, it's Friday Mug Club drink special night, so that's a good thing for you. And but also they're doing halfway to Christmas on Friday night, so I think Santa, Mrs. Claus, and some reindeer will be there, and they'll be giving away to some stadium snow globes. And then post-game fireworks are always huge at these minor league settings.
Right. The Friday Mug Club is one of my favorites, except those Fridays that I have to work and cover it for Metro Sports Report. They frown on filling up my mug in the press box all night long. So
it's probably not a good idea. And then another thing, Autism Action Jersey Night is also that Friday night, and that's where, and I know you're good at this, fans can bid on jerseys and take the players' jerseys home that night. And in fact, I think you just go right on the field and they hand you your jersey, you can get it signed, you can get pictures. And I know you're good to usually get at least one, if not two of those each time they do it.
Yeah, there aren't many that I don't get some. Now, they had, this week they had Iowa State Cyclone Night, so the jerseys were Cardinal and Gold with an Iowa State patch. I had to draw the line there. I being a Hawkeye football season ticket holder, I could not bring myself to bid on a Cyclone baseball jersey, so I did not. But I know every one of the jerseys was purchased. That's always good to see. And the guys, the players really, you can tell, enjoy, particularly if they won, enjoy that event as well. You do go down on the field afterward. The bidding stops in the 6th inning. By the 7th or 8th or whatever, you've paid for your jersey, you get a receipt. After the game, you go down there to the dugout, in front of the dugout, with your receipt, and you find your player. And you literally take the jersey off their back. You can get pictures taken with them. They'll autograph it for you, and you take the jersey home with you that night. So
that's Friday night, June 27th. Saturday night, as I mentioned, Twins night. Rod Carew, Twins organist Sue Nelson, and T.C. Bear will be there. And again, post-game fireworks. And on Sunday, fans can run the bases after the game, I assume, not during the game. Autographs from the Colonels after the game, which I believe is an every Sunday thing as well. So there's just a lot going on. And some of it's Twins weekend stuff, but some of it's just stuff that they do all the time.
Yeah, the Sunday afternoon autograph session is an every home Sunday deal. After the game, win or lose, the players all go out into right field, and anybody who wants to come down and get in line to get their autographs does so. So there's really no shortage of opportunities to get autographs, with the Colonels, and Sundays are the perfect time to do it.
Steve, who's the jersey in the background?
Actually, there's two of them back there. I've got the pink one is from the Cancer Awareness Night. That was Randy Rosario's. He was on the DL, but he was still with the team that night, so I got that. And the white one is from Star Wars Night. It's a Stormtrooper jersey. I got two that night. That one I think is Hudson Boyd's.
Fantastic.
What's that?
Who was the other one, and who are some of the previous years or other jerseys you've got?
Oh, gosh. Yorman Landa was the other one I got on Star Wars Night. Holy cow, I'm trying to remember now who all I've gotten yet this year. Going back a ways, back when they were still an Angels affiliate, on a Star Wars Night, the jerseys, they look like, a Wookiee kind of theme. And I have Cam Bedrosian's for that. At the time, Cam was not having a very good year with the Colonels, and that's Steve Bedrosian's son. But since that time, he's actually become one of the better pitching prospects in their organization. So, God, I don't remember who all. I know oh gosh, I honestly I couldn't tell you. I've got so many of those things hanging up on walls and doors and stuff around here. To remember who I've got is kind of difficult.
It's a good thing that they write their names on them for you.
Yeah, well, and I will say this: Harmon Killebrew would be proud of Randy Rosario because Randy's got the most legible autograph of just about any Colonels player I've ever had sign a jersey for me. So. Harmon and Kadir, those guys would be proud of Randy.
Hey, when we talked earlier, you brought up an article that I had not heard of that mentioned a rumor that's been out there, not necessarily a rumor, but just something that's been out there for a while, and obviously that has to do with the St. Paul Saints and Dave St. Peter's desire to at some point make them an affiliated ball club for the Twins. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're working on?
Yeah, and actually I'll have this story posted actually either later tonight or sometime tomorrow morning probably. Dave St. Peter has never been shy in public appearances about talking about the possibility of the St. Paul Saints eventually becoming an affiliate of the Twins. And most recently he did that this morning. He was addressing a breakfast of the business journals in St. Paul or Minneapolis, I'm not sure, in the Twin Cities someplace. He was on the agenda along with, I'm going to draw a blank on his name, but the general manager of the Saints, Scherer, something along those lines, I think. And the subject came up again, and St. Peter, didn't sound to me like he made any bones about the fact that it's an idea that they are discussing. It's an idea that would have certain advantages for both organizations. And I've been in two different in-person. Been in two different venues where St. Peter's been on the docket and has said similar things. So I don't think that's ever been much of a secret that he sees that as a possibility. What caught me a little bit by surprise on this one was it almost came across as being something that would be considered sooner than what I thought it would. The Twins and the Colonels have an agreement that runs through 2016. I sort of always assumed that that would get renewed for at least another 2 years, maybe even 4 after that. And then sometime toward the end of the decade, you might see some sort of movement toward an affiliation in St. Paul. But it doesn't look to me like they're necessarily talking about waiting that long.
Now, and we had discussed briefly about all the hurdles that a team would have to overcome to really make it in St. Paul. And now you're much more familiar with the Midwest League than Seth and I are, obviously not being real close. But Seth and I both had made trips to Beloit, which were a drivable distance. But as far as going on the road, Cedar Rapids is relatively close, 4 hours away from the cities. But if you were a team that was playing in the cities and you had to take a road trip, tell us the distances that this team would have to travel.
Yeah, that's certainly one of the obstacles. And St. Peter was very blunt, too, in saying that there are a number of obstacles that would have to be overcome in order to put a team in St. Paul. But perhaps the biggest one is that St. Paul is kind of outside the footprint of the Midwest League. And Cedar Rapids at 240, 250 miles, whatever it is the closest Midwest League team to St. Paul. Appleton is about 270, I think. And those are the only two teams that I think are less than 300 miles. Beloit is probably right at 300. The others are all in the 300 someplace just for the Western Division. And then when you go to the Eastern Division, they're all at 500 or more. So I think South Bend might come in at 497 or something along those lines if you take the right route. But everybody else is at least 500 miles away. So it would make travel at a much greater expense, not only for the team in St. Paul, but for every team that has to travel up there, particularly the Western Division teams that would have a pretty good jaunt, from Peoria and from Burlington up to St. Paul. So it's that would be problematic under the terms of the professional baseball agreement between Major League and minor league ball. Anytime you travel more than 500 miles, players are supposed to get a day off. That could wreak havoc for scheduling anytime you have the cross-divisional series. So it would be a challenge. And, of course, they'd have to actually find a team to move there, which I think would be difficult as well. So, there's really only 3 teams in the Midwest League that aren't currently playing in relatively new or recently remodeled stadiums that come to mind, and that's Beloit, Clinton, and Burlington. And my understanding is all 3 of those teams are community owned, so it's not like you can just go in and find a friendly owner to sell to you. Those communities take a lot of pride in their team. And it would be a hard sell, I think, to convince them to sell and have the team moved.
My out-of-the-box idea when we had talked was that maybe it wouldn't necessarily have to be a full season low A team. That the Twins, and I don't know exactly what the numbers are, but the Twins are a team that doesn't have a short season low A ball team. And Steve had brought up there's a division out west in the Idaho area that has a short season low A, and then there's a New York Penn League on the East Coast where it's a short season, the GCL or the Appy League would be, but it's considered low A ball. So that was just my idea. If the Twins and a handful of other teams could get basically what the St. Paul division is right now, that they could do something like that. And I don't know if that's even feasible or if that's even something that the Twins would want to do. But that was just something that I had brainstormed that would maybe be an out-of-the-box solution to this issue.
Yeah, I know at one time when this came up, the folks with the Saints, I think it was Mike Vick at the time, had said he wasn't all that thrilled about any option that had him playing a full season in St. Paul, because April and May were not exactly good attendance months in St. Paul, Minnesota for a minor league team. So I don't know. It's something I think that obviously Twin Cities fans of the Twins would love to see happen. It's something certainly Twins fans in eastern Iowa would be disappointed about. But it just seems to me like it's got an awful lot of things. There are a lot of obstacles to overcome to do it. But the Twins decide they want to do it. There's nothing there that couldn't be overcome if they start throwing their weight and their money around.
Which they're so eager to do quite often.
Yeah. Well, the Twins have always been a free spending organization, and money just really doesn't mean anything to them.
Right. I think they actually coined the term "make it rain."
Yeah. I think that was when the Yankees came to town, wasn't it?
Oh, that could have been it. Seth, you have anything over there? Up there?
Steve, who is your first half MVP? If you want to break it into hitter and pitcher, that'd be cool.
For the Colonels?
For the Colonels, yes.
I'd have to go with Mitch Garver, certainly as the hitter. There's, as we said, there are a couple other guys that have played a very valuable role, but Mitch would be my MVP from an offensive standpoint. And when 5/6 or whatever of your starting rotation is at 5 point whatever and above for ERAs, the one guy who's down there at 2-something or whatever is probably got to be my pitching MVP, and that would be Cole Stewart.
And then last question for me is, what is as a fan of the Colonels, the story or something that you're looking forward to the most, or the player you're looking for a big second half from? But then as a media type as well, what's the one story you're kind of looking to, look to cover over the next half season?
Oh, I'm hoping to actually cover some wins. That would be refreshing. That would be, the one thing about the Midwest League, the Class A leagues, is everybody starts over. Right now the Colonels are tied for first place in the Midwest League in the second half. Everybody starts at 0-0, and it's your division is an 8-team division, but you don't have to beat 7 other teams. You only have to beat 6 other teams, because 2 of those teams have already or 5 other teams, because 2 of those teams have already qualified for the postseason. So it's realistic, perhaps a little optimistic, but if the pitching would come around, it's realistic to think that the Colonels could compete for the postseason again, and that would be the story that I would most like to cover, probably. I think from a fan interest standpoint, I'm like everybody else. I'm not on his case about it or anything like some folks are, but I'd like to see Cole Stewart start striking out a few more guys, dominating a little bit. Of course, that also means he'd probably get promoted, and I'd have to stop watching him play. I'd like to see those first and second round draft picks in Cedar Rapids, perhaps. That would be fun, I think, to see those guys play. I'm not sure either one of them will play here this year or ever, for that matter. They could skip Cedar Rapids altogether, I suppose.
Steve, I think that Seth just totally left our phone call, so maybe you said something that really made him mad.
Maybe, or I offended him terribly. That's right, gosh.
I mean, if one of those things happen, I think you're the de facto new co-host of the show.
Oh, that'll put an end to your blog or your podcasting days in a hurry, won't it?
I don't know. I mean, you got some good insight on the Colonels baseball. I was hoping to make it down for the Twins weekend, and then I told my wife about it, and she reminded me that we have birthday parties for my sons on that weekend. So,
doesn't getting old and having commitments and things really stink sometimes?
It does. I like nights where I can just sit on my couch and watch TV.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way, and I like to be able to just go to the ballpark whenever I want to. And one thing about it, when you get to be as old as I am, and your kids get to be as old as mine are, that freedom does return. You just have to pray that you live long enough to see that time.
But then you're watching the grandbabies, right?
Well, that's true. That's true. I've got a 10-month-old grandson, and I'm anxious to get him out to the ballpark too.
The nice thing about grandkids is that you can just give them back.
Yes. Yes.
I would. I had stopped by at my parents' house. This is not baseball related at all, and my daughter was complaining about her stomach hurting, and my dad offered her ice cream. And I was like, "What the heck?" I said, if I was 7, 8 years old and I complained to you that my stomach hurt, you would have either told me to A, suck it up, or B, go lay down. There would have never been like, "Hey, do you want some ice cream?" And so they laugh about it, and then they go get her ice cream.
Yeah, it's this whole being a grandparent thing is so different from being a father or mother. And my folks were exactly the same way. It's like I can't believe, that they let my kids get away with the stuff they did. But that's the benefit of living long enough to do that.
And now you'll be doing the same thing to that 10-month.
Absolutely, already working on it. We are working on having him throw left-handed though. Yeah, absolutely. I mentioned that to Terry Ryan too. I told him my 10-month-old grandson is starting to throw his toys, and we're putting him in his left hand and making him throw the toys left-handed. And Ryan said, "Yeah, well, don't stop doing that. You better hope that he stays left-handed for another 18 years." So.
Perfect. Well, Steve, thanks a lot for hanging out with us tonight. And now that you're a little bit older, you probably want to get to bed.
Yeah, it's a little past my bedtime. It's after 10 o'clock, so I probably need to get my beauty sleep.
I think you're making that up because we were exchanging messages at midnight last night. So
we were.
He was not
so early.
He doesn't go to bed early.
No, I'm a bit of a night owl, unfortunately.
But was I exchanging message? Okay? So we've been on for about 40 minutes, and you haven't even made a plug for your favorite locale in Cedar Rapids.
Bushwood. I haven't even made a plug for my own blog. Never mind, the place I go to drink beer.
Do that.
Yeah. Well, so I'll start with the blog, knuckleballsblog.com, and of course you can also find my stuff at twinsdaily.com. And I cover the Colonels for metrosportsreport.com. As far as my favorite watering hole, Bushwood Sports Bar is where I can be found at least a couple of times a week usually. It's not as baby friendly as other places are in town, so my family doesn't get there as often as we used to when we get together. But we have found a few other places and that are perhaps a little better, and from that standpoint, so we're getting around showing a little more variety in our watering holes.
So if we do make it down to Cedar Rapids, that's just one thing we should do. And I remember last year, vaguely, it was kind of foggy. We ordered my brothers and I, we got like some sort of crazy pizza with sauerkraut on it, and I think it was a Reuben pizza. At the Bushwood, so
Yep.
No, the beer was good and the food was fantastic. So there's a reason that you're there. Obviously, it's for the beer, but there's other reasons to be there too. I think Seth likes the waitresses.
Yeah, and I haven't had the guts to tell him that the waitress that he favored is gone. Yeah, she's not there anymore. Yeah.
Oh man.
I know. So you're probably rethinking that whole coming down in 2 weeks, right?
Yeah, I guess I'll have to come up with another reason, like, I don't know, baseball or something.
All right, guys.
All right, Steve. Well, thanks a lot, and we'll have you on here again sometime towards the end of the year, and we can recap the whole season.
Hopefully, we'll be talking about the playoffs or something.
Perfect. All right. Thanks for joining us tonight.
All right. Thanks a lot, guys.
Have a good night.
Yep. You too.
All right, Seth. We got 80 minutes in, and we got a whole list of things to talk about. Where do you want to start?
Well, we should start with the fact that I don't have a computer, because 2 weeks after going and getting the operating system fixed, my hard drive crashed. So I'm without a computer, which is why I'm on my phone. Although I'm on this really old one that's really slow, but it doesn't do much. So yeah, that's fun.
Yeah, my hard drive, my update on my hard drive was I brought it into the experts, drove an hour to bring it to the experts. They called me yesterday and said, sorry, uh, can't do anything for you, but we can give you the number of some people that maybe could, but
Maybe.
now we're talking at least $1,000.
Really?
And I was, not that important.
Yeah.
So,
Mine in on Saturday afternoon. I drove about an hour from my parents over to Fargo and met with the Geek Squad person, and they took about 4 minutes and looked and realized that's what it was. And I did get a warranty for like 2 years, and that included hardware. So I can get it for free, but they have to send it off, and it's going to be like 2 to 3 weeks before they mail it back to me. So that's a little frustrating.
that's ridiculous. But are you going to get a new computer out of the deal?
No, apparently they're just going to put everything back in the old one.
Doesn't seem right.
So yeah, we should talk more about baseball. And by the way, I did just lose a connection there, so which was nice because after an hour and 10 minutes or 20 minutes, I was able to use the facilities. In that minute that I was gone, that's the hardest thing. People might wonder what the most difficult thing about talking for 2 hours about baseball is. It's not coming up with topics. It's not about us rambling because both of us are just fine at that.
We're good.
It's 2 hours. That's a long time without going to the bathroom, especially with all the water or whatever you're drinking is.
Michelob Golden Light.
Yeah, I got water.
So
Let's talk about baseball, huh?
yeah, let's talk about baseball. Let's start. We talked briefly about the news this afternoon that Johan Pino would be making the start for the Twins. I'm thoroughly surprised. I didn't see that coming, mostly because, like, even though he was probably the most deserving, the fact that he wasn't on the 40-man, and the fact that there were other guys, maybe not equally deserving, but also deserving, that would have been much easier to call up.
Right.
So all we know right now is Deduno is not starting. Sounds like he's going to the bullpen.
Yep.
And that Pino is coming up. Now, the 40-man roster spot probably won't be an issue. Mike Pelfrey can go on the 60-day. I'm assuming that's the move that they make. But that doesn't solve the 25-man roster dilemma. What do you think they do?
Well, the tough part is that the 25-man roster decision involves most likely 3 guys that are also out of options. So either they, put Pelfrey on the 60-day disabled list and then still get down to 39 if they were to, in reality they could still put Deduno on waivers at that point. They could put Chris Parmelee. They could put Matt Guerrier. They could put Jared Burton. I mean, they could put several guys on waivers and get them off the 40-man roster to make room as well. But those are 4 guys that I think their names have come up as guys that could come off the 25-man roster. The only pitcher I think that's a legitimate possibility who does have an option, or actually a couple of options, is Caleb Thielbar. But after a up and down May, he's been pretty good again in June, and that just doesn't make a lot of sense. So my personal opinion is they're going to DFA somebody. I'm not sure which one, because Guerrero's been okay. Burton certainly has enough track record that you don't want to just give him away because someone would claim him. And Parmelee, he might clear, but he could become a free agent. And with Morales around and Sano probably around next year, Mauer's obviously playing, I don't know where his opportunity comes in. So I think it's a tough decision.
So I guess I hadn't even thought that route. I guess I was thinking if they were going to get rid of a hitter, it could be Nunez to the DL if he can't play.
Right.
If he can play, then Florimon is unnecessary.
Right.
So I guess my thought was that it would be one of those two, and that Pelfrey would just move. But then at the same time, I think Guardian made the comment that he wanted to stick with 12 pitchers. So then we're talking about it has to be a pitcher. I guess I don't know. I mean, Thielbar would be the easiest one to move because you don't lose a guy. And if you think Burton still has something in the tank, if you think Guerrero is worth it, which they obviously did when they lost other guys for him, then you keep those two guys. The only thing then is that you're limiting yourself to Dunsing as your only left-hander in the bullpen. Right. So,
it's a really intriguing decision because, as you mentioned, there's 5 guys that are making starts in Rochester who very much are deserving of an opportunity. I think a lot of us were thinking it might be Trevor May, but he just started on Monday night and was excellent and threw 120 pitches, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. So he couldn't pitch on Thursday. One theory I have, and it's just a theory, it's just a thought that they could do, is they could bring up Pino, add him to the 40-man roster on Thursday, keep DeDuno around as the 13th pitcher, just in case Pino struggles early and you do need some long relief, he could eat some innings. And then after the game, Pino's not, a prospect. As much as I'm as high as on him as anybody and really love the story and do think he's deserving of this promotion, I know that at least in the minds of most baseball people and scouts and evaluators, he's not a big league pitcher. And I'm just being honest. A lot of people think that. So you could have him come up, make one start, and then take him off the 40-man roster right after the game and bring up a position player. Or at that point, call up Trevor May, rearrange the rotation, and he could be starting on his regular rest on Sunday or Monday. So to me, they do have a ton of options. If Pino pitches well, maybe you end up DFAing DeDuno or someone else based on what happened. I'm sure they've got a ton of contingency plans. But I think the big story here, one will be all this roster moving and how this is all going to play. But, Yohan Pino, I love the story. And I know I got beat up a bunch on Twitter because I've been doing this hashtag free Johan for a long time, kind of going back to the days when I know that, Aaron Gleeman used to always do the free Johan when it came to Santana and moving him from the bullpen into the starting rotation and things like that. So it's kind of a play off of that since Yohan Pino's name is spelled with a Y instead of a J. But, the fact is he's not a prospect. He's 30 years old. He tops out at about 88 miles per hour. But my point is, take away everything else. If the Twins are going with Kendrys Morales and they're going with this quote-unquote win-now type of decisions that the Morales one certainly indicates, then it's not about bringing up Alex Meyer or Trevor May, who are clearly the prospects in the bunch. It's about the guys who are doing the best job right now and have earned that promotion. And to me, that's Pino because he's, just to throw the numbers out there, he's 9-1, 1.92 ERA, 0.93 WHIP. He's given up just 6 hits per 9 innings, walking less than 2.5 per 9 innings. And even despite the lack of quote-unquote stuff or perceived stuff, he's striking out a batter an inning over half of a season. So I just don't see a negative with this move.
Yeah, he's been phenomenal, but I guess my thought was that Darnell, I guess for me it came down to the 40-man thing. He wasn't on it. If you're going to reward a guy, great, but if you're Rochester, who's really good right now, you're not going to take the guy and then try to outright him off the roster. And he has options left, so I think what you said earlier, you could take him off the 25-man and leave him on the 40-man and option him down. But you don't want to
Right.
You don't want to take the risk of doing like they did with Matt Fox a couple of years ago and try to take him right off the roster and lose him. He's a valuable piece for a AAA team that's in first place in their division. So I guess I'm okay with it. I didn't think it was going to happen. Because I figured he was, fifth in line. You do bring up the Alex Meyer thing, and I think his destination this year is not going to be the Twins' starting rotation. As much as we'd like to see him in the Twins' starting rotation, he didn't pitch a lot last year. And I think May could be the guy that goes in the rotation, and Meyer could be a guy that's in the bullpen. And if the Twins are still in contention in August, there's a potential that you could see Perkins as the ninth inning guy with the setup crew of Casey Fien, Alex Meyer, and maybe Nick Birdie. And that's kind of scary for if you can get to 7, you'd think that group of 4 can get you to the 9th. And when you have a guy like Phil Hughes pitching as well as he is, and Kevin Correa pitching like he has been recently, and Ricky Nolasco, if he can turn it on, this pitching staff could be a playoff, a team that could get you into contention for the playoffs. And I think, like you mentioned, if they're trying to do what's best and get them there, I'm not going to fault this move, even though I don't know it would have been any worse going to Logan Darnell or Chris Johnson, 2 guys that have already made a major league appearance, as opposed to the 30-year-old guy that's never even had a sniff of the major league. So it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other for me as far as making that call. With the difference being now we're taking up a 40-man roster spot, and I would prefer to have Pino in the organization at least for the remainder of the year.
Yeah, 2 quick points on that. Number one, Pino has only been a part-time starter for the Red Wings this year.
Right.
He has made spot starts when guys get called up, like Chris Johnson did, or when Logan Darnell did. So that's what got him in there. And then Scott Diamond being so terrible, that's why he's in the rotation more full-time now. He's taken Diamond's spot the last couple of times in the rotation. But I think if he did have a big league role, it would be just that. It would be a swingman. It'd be the guy who could start when someone has the flu suddenly, or you just need a spot guy or a doubleheader starter or something like that. But he's also a guy that can eat a bunch of innings, and that's what he's done for Rochester. And Rochester's been terrific this year. So, like you said, you don't want to just lose that guy, because most likely you're still going to be calling up Trevor May here very shortly, we assume. I do like your comment on Meyer because, first of all, of the 5, he's probably pitching the 5th best. And the thing that concerns me isn't so much, obviously he's striking out 10.6 per 9, but he's walking almost 4.5 per 9, which isn't going to translate well as a starter in the big leagues. And I think getting his feet wet this August or September out of the bullpen, where he's only pitching 1 inning at a time, may be a good way to, 1, limit innings, while 2, exposing him to the big league atmosphere and have him ready next year, hopefully at 100%, to go into the starting rotation.
Right, and I don't know that they would want to send him to the Arizona League to get him more innings. Like they did. I mean, they did that with May last year, and he'd already pitched 150 innings. The other thing, too, with going back on Pino, I can't find the stats, but it seemed to me that he pitched a ton over the winter, too. That he's just a guy that has a rubber arm, and if they need him, if they needed him to pitch 4 innings today, he could do it, and then 2 days later say, hey, we need you, that he could just continue to pitch. And he's been doing it at a very high level, not at the highest level, obviously, but he's been doing it at a high level in AAA now all year. And, yeah, let's give him a shot and see what happens. But I don't see that he's going to be a guy that's going to be a solution, but you kind of said that he's a swing man. So I'm curious to see, but I do like your idea that, if something were to happen, that Trevor May, and not necessarily only Trevor May, but any of those AAA guys could just, call them up and give it a shot. And they all have options left. They all can be, very easily brought up and sent down and go with the hot hand. At this point, the Twins rotation is okay. They're not phenomenal. Hughes has been great. Gibson's been pretty good. Nolasco, Correa, they're deserving of their spots for now. But to just find that 5th guy, and if you got to rotate them through all those AAA guys just to find the hot hand, I'm more than willing to do it. And Pino right now has that hot hand.
Yeah, the comparison we've heard so much for Pino is Anthony Slama, who put up just dominant numbers all the way throughout the minor league system. He had the walk issue, which right now Meyer is kind of is a concern for me with Meyer. It used to be a concern with May, but he's dropped his walk rate, half a walk this year and a half a walk last year. So I think that's a positive or something to be optimistic about. I'm not, I advocate the stories, but I'm not going to sit here and say that Johan Pino is some sort of an answer. I think he's a short-term, let's try to get through a few starts, or let's make it work so that DeDuno gets back to the bullpen, and eventually, maybe even by the end of the week, you've got Trevor May in the rotation. He's making just one start. But as I will say, as it related to Slamma, and as I would say as it relates to Johan Pino, when you put up the types of numbers that they have and that Pino has this year, you may assume, and we all assume, it's not going to go great for him. But when you're pitching that well, you deserve the opportunity. And I think he deserves the opportunity. We'll see how it goes. Again, I don't expect it to be a long-term thing by any means. But you never know. Sometimes lightning strikes and everything's wonderful.
Right. We're at 10:35. Unlike any other week now that I'm off school, I actually went through and tried to script this whole thing, and we've not even been close to following that script. So what we wanted to do is we wanted at 10:50 to take some viewer questions. I'd like to still do that. But I want to talk about a few things that are coming up in with the Twins. And the one thing that kind of went under the radar was Glenn Perkins made some comments today about Josemiel Pinto and just not getting it done as a catcher. Did you happen to read that or hear that interview?
It was on the Mackey and Judd show today, I believe, when Glenn Perkins did his normal weekly chat with them. But I actually didn't hear it when I was at work. I did read Mike Berardino's account of it, and I guess my opinion is that's the kind of stuff that needs to stay in-house.
Right.
I mean, that's beyond the front office just saying, we think that Aaron Hicks needs to do a little bit more preparation. That's a one comment, and it's left at that. Perkins, as he should, he was asked the question, and he's not going to be afraid to answer it. He was pretty blunt. And I don't know how I feel about that. I love the honesty. We always want that. I don't see it as a great thing, to be honest.
Right. To me, I don't know. Having not heard the interview, I always wonder, has this been taken out of context? But I don't know that you could take that out of context. Does Pinto need to get better at pitch framing? Absolutely. But does that need to be said on the local radio station? Absolutely not. And it seemed very out of character based on, they had Perkins on the hot stove every Wednesday night all winter. And he never even, everything he said was very politically correct, never towed any controversial lines, was always very proper in how he answered questions. So this, to me, it just doesn't, there's something that doesn't smell right. And I don't know exactly what to make out of it, if it's going to be something that we hear anything else of. But it was just, the comments were very curious, and hopefully it's dealt with and we don't hear about it again, but hopefully someone is saying you can't do that as the leader of the team.
I know that Kurt Suzuki doesn't have the best numbers defensively, but if you're watching Twins games when Suzuki's catching compared to when Pinto's catching, it's night and day. You can see it. You can see the difference in just how much better Kurt Suzuki is at all of those things. And pitch framing, to me, is something I caught a little bit in amateur ball. I'd never wanted to do it. I don't know why. I wish I would have done it more, but when I started doing it when I was, say, 19 or 20, I loved it. And pitch framing is something that's absolutely a skill. It's something you work on. It's something you want to grab that pitch just outside and turn your glove real quick so that it looks like it's a strike. That is a definite thing. I'm still not sure how I feel about the pitch framing statistics because they're dependent on so many other things. As Parker told me on Twitter today, there's enough of a sample size that there has to be some meaning to it. And I'm not saying there isn't any value to it. To me, and I'm that way with all defensive stats, to be honest. I'm always a little more believing in the eye test kind of stuff. when it comes to the pitch framing and defensive things. But
Well,
I just you can visually see the difference between the two.
right, and I guess watching the game last night, I think it was Dozier on a two-strike count got a pitch that was outside, and it was called a ball. And I think if it would have been a three-ball count, if it had been 3-1, it would have been called a strike.
Right.
And yet that's going to show as the catcher's inability to frame that pitch.
Right.
And then the numbers, the numbers that, Suzuki's cost 9.4 runs. Come on, that seems absurd. That
absolutely ridiculous.
There's no way that a few balls or strikes is 8 or 9 runs. Maybe 8 or 9 base runners. But what percent of base runners score? I mean, you're talking that whole thing to me is, yeah. If a guy can't catch, if a guy can't potentially catch a base stealer, that's a much bigger problem than not pulling that one ball into the strike zone. There's too many variables, and for Perkins to do that publicly was not okay, in my opinion. And I don't know that there's anybody that's going to say, great job, throwing a teammate under the bus publicly. That's not okay in youth sports. It's not okay in professional sports.
Yeah, I think a couple of things as it relates to that, and getting away from even the Perkins part of it, the Twins chose to let Josmil Pinto, with his defensive liabilities, catch Sam DeDuno. And let's get this straight. That's not going to be easy for the best catchers. And secondly, you're not going to get the close calls when DeDuno's on the mound because the ump isn't going to give the close calls to a guy that isn't consistently around the plate. And so, I mean, there's so many different variables. The other thing, and this, I don't know if this goes unnoticed or if it's even a thing or if it's just a theory, the Twins in general, Suzuki, Pinto, they're both not throwing out very many base runners. But with 5 right-handed pitchers, several of them that barely even look the runner back at first or second, you're not going to have very good steal percentages. And I mean, how many times have we heard, man, that guy got a great jump? Well, they do. They get huge jumps. So
right.
That might be the one thing that says, okay, maybe we should get one lefty in the rotation. And I'm not even saying that's the right thing to do, but I mean, to me, caught stealing percentage is just as much based on the pitcher as it is on the catcher.
Right.
The other thing about catching is it is about the other things. Pitch framing is part of it. I just don't like the stat. But it's calling the right pitches. It's working with that pitcher, and clearly Suzuki's able to do that. Pryor's able to do that. Obviously, you and I were both big Drew Butera backers because he was able to do that. Pinto's not a catcher. I mean, I think we need to just realize that. Right. Maybe he can be a decent third catcher, but he's a hitter, and that's it.
Hey, but I did do the conversion, and if Pinto wouldn't have been catching Trevor May's game last night, Trevor May would have pitched a complete game, not allowed any hits, not walked any batters, and struck out 46 people.
in 9 innings.
In 9 innings, because José Pinto's that bad at pitch framing that no pitcher can do anything, yet a AAA guy can throw a masterpiece to the same catcher that the all-star closer has a problem with.
Right. No, I mean, that's a great point. And that comes back to what is that difference between a great catcher and a catcher who's obviously been good enough to do some catching in the big leagues. And we're not talking about guys that are bad high school or college catchers. This is a not very good major league catcher who's probably a pretty good minor league catcher. And he's always had good throw-out, statistics anyway, so it's a lot of small sample size to this as well.
Right. Other things that happened this week, Trevor Plouffe fell wrong while fielding a ball, went on the disabled list. Pedro Flormon came up, as we discussed. Eduardo Nunez pulled a hammy and hasn't played. Brian Dozier out with a back injury, had to play because of the injuries to the other guys, and promptly hit a home run. Aaron Hicks has been sent on a rehab assignment. He was placed on the disabled list. Do we want to talk All-Star game? Do we want to skip over that for the week? Do we want to talk about Arcia? We got to get some minor league stuff in and some questions. Your call, Seth. What do you want to do?
Well, I mean, I think we should touch base on all those things. I mean, Trevor Plouffe with the oblique strain, I don't think that's a 15-day thing, and it's something that could potentially affect him all year. So that might be something to watch, certainly, to see how he comes back from that. Florimon, I know there were a lot of people disappointed that he came up, but one, that was a 40-man roster decision, and two, we've seen in the 2 or 3 games he's actually been on the roster. Danny Santana's at short, Eduardo Nunez is at third, and Sam Fold is in center. We may see Florimon tomorrow as the backup guy who gets a start, but I think he's really just there for depth right now. Arcia has been pretty terrible since he was hot. Those things that Roy Smalley talked about with that hitch in his swing, I mean, once you see that, you realize people are going to get him out. Plus, tonight he was going against John Lester, who's one of the better left-handed pitchers. So, and maybe that's as far as we need to go, unless you want to add to that. But I did want to at least throw it out there, whether we talk about it. We talked a lot about All-Stars and which Twins are candidates, and Brian Dozier's there, Phil Hughes is there, and I think Len Perkins is a given. Kurt Suzuki should be an All-Star this year, and I don't know how he can't be. So, I mean, do you agree, disagree? It's one of those things that hits you when you actually say it, but if you look at it, he's an All-Star this year.
Yeah, I don't think he will be. I think the Twins will get Hughes and Perkins, and that's going to be all they get. Even if I mean, I'm not saying Suzuki's not deserving, but I don't see him making it.
Yeah, I don't see them getting 4 players, and I think Dozier at second base is going up against some really good players with a lot of track record, which is going to make it tough. But if you look at the catchers in the American League, Wieder's just the one that's been maybe a little bit better than him, and now he's having Tommy John surgery, which everyone else is too. But I mean, Suzuki deserves it, like you said, and whether or not he makes it isn't so much the point of me wanting to talk about this, but I think people that are listening take a second and realize how good he's been.
Right. No, he's been fantastic. His name came up when Wieters first got hurt. Jim Bowden from ESPN had actually brought Suzuki's name up as a potential trade target for the Orioles. Do you see, or what would need to happen maybe for the Twins to consider moving him?
I think they need to be in mid-July and be 8 or 10 games out, which I think is certainly possible. As much as we hope that isn't the case, it is certainly possible. I also wonder, though, with Pinto looking like he's not really a catcher of the future, and with Herman and Fryer as being your backup guys, you have to wonder, are they willing to sign him for another year, and would he be willing to sign a contract before he becomes a free agent? I mean, to me, that's a 50-50 thing. If you're not going to trade him before the July deadline, you might want to lock him up for another year if you can.
Right, and I'd be perfectly fine with that. According to ESPN sortable rankings, Salvador Perez leads all American League catchers with a 2.3 WAR. Derek Norris of Oakland has a 2.1 WAR. Jan Gomes, Cleveland Indians, is 1.5, and Kurt Suzuki is 1.4. And I don't even know at this point who leads the voting. Is it Brian McCann?
It's Wieters.
It is Wieters.
Yeah.
So, McCann's been pretty terrible. What's funny is there's only, and I mean it's not funny, I guess it makes sense because catchers don't always play full-time, but there are only 5 qualified catchers in the American League. Perez, Gomes, Suzuki, Jason Castro of the Astros, and Brian McCann for the Yankees, who currently sports a WAR of 0.
Yeah, that's another one of those big contracts. I mean, right now, you look at Mauer's contract, you look at McCann's contract, you look at Justin Verlander and what he's doing this year, and he's got a bunch of years. It just goes back to the point where signing those long-term contracts rarely is a good thing. I think Derek Jeter is the one example that you can look at his initial 10-year deal and say that was a pretty good deal.
Right. Let's go into the minor leagues. I don't know that we need to go through every box score, but let's just start at the top. Rochester. The notable news, obviously, with Pino going up, started last night when C.J. Fee tweeted that Sean Gilmartin would be making the start tonight, which he did. And then I think the game got rained out, or,
He threw 3 1/3 innings before the game got suspended, but he did all right. He gave up 6 hits, but 2 unearned runs. No walks, 2 strikeouts. So it's a decent first showing this year in AAA for Sean Gilmartin.
And him having success in AAA shouldn't come as any surprise because I'm fairly certain that he played mostly AAA last year for the Braves.
Until he got hurt and then he got sent down.
So him going up there is fine. The thing I guess that I wonder is they're not moving him up just to for a couple starts. He's going to be in this rotation for the rest of the year, which makes you think that Sam Duno is not coming back into the Twins rotation, and that whatever move is ultimately made, if Pino's long term, whatever. But if it's May or if it's Darnell, that one of those guys is going to be manning that 5th position in the Twins rotation.
Yeah, and then frankly, if Pino goes back down to Rochester, he probably jumps into that swing role again, which is a role that the Twins have with Virgil Vasquez at New Britain as well. And people don't like having those older players, but they provide a lot of value in being able to do just that. So it'll be interesting to see if his roster moves made at New Britain as well to take his place. And we'll kind of talk through that as we go forward here. But I mean, honestly,
one aside.
Sure.
You go ahead. Mine is different.
Okay. You look at that Rochester roster, and we talked about the 5 starters. You talk about A.J. Ochter, who should be talked about a lot more than he is. But offensively, the guy to talk about has been Davinson Romero. Tonight, I know he had his 18th double. He's hitting .314, and he put on quite a show. When I talked to Gardy or asked him after one of the games where Romero is kind of impressed, he just kept raving about his bat, and that he's improved defensively, which I don't think you see from the Rochester stats. I think he's got like 15 errors already, but the guy can hit, and he showed that this spring.
I would like to see him get a shot. If Plouffe is going to be out for a while, let's see what he's got. I mean, obviously he fits in that not great position in between Plouffe, who's proving that he's a major league player, and Miguel Sano, and really Romero's in a no man's land. But if Plouffe is going to be out for a month, give him the everyday appearance at third base and see what he had. Can he hit major league pitching?
Yeah, I mean, there's the 40-man roster concern there as well, but his name did come up, at least in forums and discussions, at least. I don't know if it did in the Twins brass discussions, but I mean, he's at least warranted that we're going to talk about him. And if Plouffe is going to be out for a while, or if there is one more injury, maybe to one of those infielders, he's got to be considered.
Right, and I guess for me, the 40-man roster thing, Palfrey's an easy move, but there's a number of other guys that could easily be moved. And we've talked about that. I don't remember what show or whatever it was, but basically numbers 35 through 40 on 40-man roster should be pretty interchangeable.
Correct.
And for the Twins, they've seemed to, just kind of been, sat still with those spots. But, let's see what happens here. He obviously has had a good couple months. He was a top prospect in the Twins rotation back when it wasn't great, and then had some unfortunate injuries, falling into a dugout and breaking his leg and things like that. But let's move down to New Britain, who played again today, and I think the guys that we need to talk about, they won 7-2. Kenny Vargas had a grand slam, and he now has 13 home runs on the year. He's batting .321. And he's getting to the point where he's too good. He's getting too good for the league. And I guess earlier I said keep him in New Britain as long as you need to, make him a September call up. At this point, I think why not move him up to Rochester?
Well, and I mean, there's a spot there. I mean, you're not going to, in my opinion, you keep going with Colabello there, and he started hitting a little bit more of late. But you've also got Brad Nelson right now, who's 31, hasn't hit all year, is getting starts, either at DH and some at first base. There's a spot there for Vargas, I think, that you could easily make without really losing anything. At this point, yeah, I agree. We are 2.5 months into the season. It's not, a quick reaction to a 4 or 6 week stretch. We're talking about 10 weeks at this point. So, yeah, I'd have no problem with him being a guy that moved up.
The other guy that obviously needs to be talked about is Eddie Rosario. And Rosario went 2 for 4 tonight. He had a walk. He's batting .306. We did get a Twitter question from, I believe it's Ryan Trozen, who, where did it go? Asked if Rosario, do you see Rosario getting moved to Rochester at all this year, or did the 50-game suspension set him back? I think, you said it a couple weeks ago. Obviously, the 50-game suspension set him back.
Right.
But really, how much did it set him back at this point?
At this point, right now, I would say very little. And I say that in the sense that, he's where he was a year ago, which is where he would have been if he wouldn't have missed the 50 games. And we talked about it during the off season. He plays enough all year round that missing 50 games may be a good rest for him. Obviously, it's not a positive in any way, and we wouldn't advocate anyone getting a 50-game suspension just for a little rest. But, he's put himself in position as well. I would not at all be surprised. We talked about this last week, too. I expect him to get a September call-up. And, frankly, if we get to that point and maybe Aaron Hicks doesn't do well in his rehab in New Britain, he could go back down there, play center field every day, and maybe you jump Rosario all the way up to the center field job in Minnesota. He keeps hitting the way he is. I always said until last year that Rosario would be to the big leagues before Sano because of his ability not to strike out the way Sano did. And then Sano had the year last year where he hit like .330 in Fort Myers, and you start thinking, okay, maybe he is going to be a quicker move up. But yeah, I'm obviously there's the injury factor, but I expect Rosario to be up pretty quick. And so at the end of the year, I think we would have both expected he might get a September call-up. And even with the 50-game suspension, I don't want to speak for you, but I still expect that 50-game or that September call-up.
Yeah, I think, I'm almost at the point where I'm wondering if the combination of Eddie Rosario and Danny Santana over the last month has made Aaron Hicks, I don't know if expendable is the right word, but the development of Aaron Hicks a lot less important.
I think that's fair in conjunction with the fact that Brian Dozier is going to be playing second base for the Twins for a long time, assuming health. I think that means that Rosario can move to center, and that takes Hicks right now out of the picture, maybe not quite yet, but very soon could be out of the picture. And next year, Rosario could be that opening day center fielder, and then at some point it's Buxton. So Hicks, he's going to have to figure out this right-handed hitting thing, see if he can be a future right fielder or if he's going to be a future fourth outfielder, or if he's going to have to do it somewhere else. That timeline is coming pretty quick.
And that is interesting because I don't remember who had said something today, but when it was announced that Hicks would go on his rehab, that he would be spending some time in right field. And I think you're saying it exactly right. Like maybe he's not the center fielder. Let's see if he can do anything else. He does have an option year left after this year. So I'm curious to see where's this career path going? It's not going well right now. But as he gets older, you'd think that he might figure it out. I just hope that he figures it out before the Twins cut bait on him. Sell low. At this point, he doesn't have a ton of value. But I'd be perfectly content with him going down to the minors for the next year and a half, and then coming up in, what would that be, 2016, in spring training and fighting for a spot on the roster. And at that point, he either makes it or he doesn't.
Right. I mean, I could see that. At the same time, I'm far from saying that he can't turn it around. I think the change to right-handed only is a positive, and it needs to be given some time. And I think the Twins need to let it take a little bit of time in the minors. The other half of it is something that nobody wants to hear, but if a top prospect doesn't become what people think he can become or should become, they say that he never reached his potential. Well, maybe his potential wasn't what we thought it was.
Right.
At the end of the day. So, there's kind of dual factors there. He was the first-round pick. Not all first-round picks, especially, I think he was taken 14th or 15th. Once you get past about the top 5 or 6, you just don't know with first-round picks.
Right. The other thing that I find somewhat interesting is do you remember what day Hicks was put on the disabled list?
It wasn't very long ago, like maybe 3, 4, 5 days ago.
And he's already starting his rehab.
Yep.
So, how serious was that injury?
Well, it was enough that he was kept out of the lineup for about 4 days before he got put on the disabled list. But at the same time, like you're saying, if he's ready to play now and only a week after playing before, maybe it wasn't very serious, which I don't think we thought it was.
No, but I mean, this was their way to get him down, get him his at-bats without optioning him. I mean, if he would have been healthy enough to play, I think they would have optioned him down as soon as Fold was ready. But since he was, somewhat not okay, they sent him down to get his at-bats, and then, if he has a really good month, maybe he comes back up and retakes that center field spot. I just don't know that that's going to happen. And then, he spends a month in New Britain and hopefully does pretty good. And then they bring him in, move him up to Rochester. So
I think he'll get optioned after his 20 days of rehab.
Yeah. And I guess that's my the guy that asked the question about Rosario, Ryan, just asked if at some point the Twins try Hicks as a pitcher.
No.
There it is, Ryan.
He hasn't done it for like 7 years. I mean, unless he changes his mind and does that, but I mean, that's going to take a long time. He hasn't pitched since he was 17.
Sometimes you just got to throw it, Seth. Drew Butera didn't pitch. He strikes people out.
Well, sure. Maybe he's your emergency pitcher, but I don't know how many teams are looking for that 14th pitcher who can actually play center field. And that's the thing about Hicks is his defense, I think. There's times where it doesn't look so great, but there's other times where you're like, yeah, he can cover some ground. He does a pretty good job out there.
Right. So who are we talking about? We're talking about New Britain. Taylor Rogers had a pretty fantastic start for New Britain, complete game. But other than that, we should talk about Nate Hansen going 4 for 4 tonight. 2
doubles.
So that's not a bad night at the office. Is there anybody else that we need to talk about with New Britain?
I think we should really jump down to the Fort Myers Miracle and specifically maybe talk about one of their pitchers who was on the mound again tonight.
Yeah, my 2013 number 5 prospect, Jose Barrios. Is that who we're talking about?
I think that's who we're talking about.
We are talking about him. So Jose Barrios, it was his last outing that he struck out like 13, or 2 outings ago.
2 outings ago.
So 2 outings ago he strikes out Oh, that was the 1st of June. Struck out 13 on the 1st of June in a complete game shutout. Comes back on the 8th. No, that's the 6th. Strikes out 9 in 8 innings. Gives up 2 earned runs on 8 hits, no walks. 5 days later on the 11th, he gets a win, going 6 innings, striking out 7. And tonight picks up another win in a 7-inning performance where he struck out 9 and walked 2. So over his last 10 games, he is 7-1 with a 1.56 ERA, 63 innings pitched, 81 strikeouts, only 11 earned runs, 18 walks, and a opposing batting average of 197.
And don't forget, he pitched. He was the starter in the Florida State League All-Star game on Saturday, where he pitched 1 inning and struck out 2 more. You know, it's a topic we've talked about a lot, and he's been pitching well. My thought, and I think you agree, was, you know, let him prove it for a little bit longer. You know, I mean, let's not push him. He just turned 20 in May. Let's not push it. Let's just see how it goes. But now when you get to that 10 to 12 starts where you're just absolutely dominant, and that's the strikeouts. It's not walking people. It's not giving up any hits. It might be time. It might be time. And the only thing, you know, whether people like it or not, you've got some older guys that you need to make a decision on. Not right away, but, you know, certainly more quickly than you do on Berrios. You've got Jason Wheeler, who spent all of last year there. You've got Matt Tomshaw and David Hurlbut, who have been putting up just crazy numbers in terms of not giving up runs and not walking anyone for, well, really their entire minor league careers. So do you move up the 24 and 25-year-olds to Double-A to test them, or do you send the 20-year-old who's been the most dominant pitcher in the Florida State League and see what happens? And I don't think there's a wrong decision there. There's nothing wrong with Berrios sticking in Fort Myers as a 20-year-old. But, yeah, and that's maybe the piece I don't understand. When do you call him up? And you'll have a different opinion than I will, than Brad Stile, who is the one who actually makes these decisions, than other teams. You know, I mean, it'll be interesting.
Right. He started out April with a 3.60 ERA in 20 innings, struck out 16, 291 opposing batting average. In May, 3-1, 184, 36 strikeouts and 29 innings, opposing batting average of 215. In June, he's 3-0, 129 ERA, 38 strikeouts and 28 innings, 4 walks, 146 opposing batting average. I mean, what more do you want the guy to do in high A? I guess that's where I'm at, and I was the guy that said, well, just leave him. But at this point, what more could he possibly do? He could let you down. He could have a bad start. Right. But if he's going to have a letdown, let's do it at Double-A. He's not struggling. There hasn't been a struggle in his last 10 games. He lost a game where he gave up 3 earned runs in 5 innings and struck out 4. That was May 1st.
Yeah, it's been a while.
He's had 8 starts where he's 6-0. He took a no decision where he struck out 10 in 7 innings and a no decision where he struck out 9 in 8 innings. What's left?
Yeah, I mean, again, you're talking about 10 starts. You're talking about essentially 8 weeks, so 2 full months of just dominance, and not just putting up a good ERA, but dominance. And you know, a lot of people were disappointed that the Twins waited to move Miguel Sano and Eddie Rosario up to New Britain last year until they clinched the division, which they clinched the division like 10 days before the first half was done. But the day that they had clinched that division, Sano and Rosario were moved up to New Britain. Right now, with I think 3 games left in the first half, Fort Myers has a half a game lead over St. Lucie for a playoff spot. Their magic number is 2. But Jose Berrios, after starting tonight, isn't going to factor into that. So there's really no reason not to move him up. I mean, I'm always of the belief that, you know, if you get a chance, if your team's got a chance for the playoffs, let these guys stick around. The rest of them that are maybe never going to get above Fort Myers or never going to, maybe get to that higher level, this might be their best time. So if they can get a playoff appearance already, you got to give them that opportunity. But Arios at this point isn't going to start one of the next 2 games. So,
and the other thing too is, even though Sean Gilmartin wasn't expected or wasn't scheduled to start for New Britain today, he did make a start. He was a New Britain starter that moved up to Rochester who started tonight. So it would seem like it could match up pretty nicely for the Rockcats to bring up Jose Barrios, plug him into Gilmartin's spot in 5 days, and go from there. I mean, it's the second biggest jump you make in baseball, so I think people need to just be ready for that. But if he comes out and dominates Double-A, you're looking at a guy that could be in the Twins rotation next year, and I don't think any of us expected that coming into this year.
No, I mean, not at all. But in spring training, you saw a guy that hits 95. I know he's hit 97 in games. He's got a sharp curveball, a good slider, and a very good changeup with good control, and a really high athleticism level. So I mean, he's just a total package right now. The only negative I think with scouting wise with him was just that he's not over like 6 foot.
Right.
There have guys who have been able to do that.
Right. Adam Walker. Let's talk a little bit about him.
He had a pretty decent weekend.
Yeah, I mean, he did all right. He went to the Florida State All-Star Game, won the Home Run Derby, and won the award for, is it like top prospect or most?
He's the most valuable player when he went 3 for 5 with a double and a home run.
But that's not what they didn't necessarily call it MVP, but I mean, essentially that's what it was. And then he came back and went like 0 for 4 with 2 strikeouts last night. But what about him? Does he get moved up?
No. I have to move here because my battery's about to die. So, I got a charger here. But I told other people, or we've talked about before too, I really don't see him getting up to Double-A if his on base percentage isn't above 300. And it's been, I think he's up there almost now. But you'd like to see some of those adjustments and that plate discipline happen. I mean, you'd like to see him do that. He's hitting home runs. That's great. But you'd like to see that plate discipline and plate control, approach, improve. And you'd like to do that at a level where he's not going to be completely overwhelmed. Not that he would be, but, I mean, again, people keep thinking he's so old, but he's 22.
Right.
There's no rush.
Hey, would it be fair to let him to maybe have him on the same path only 1 year later than Vargas is on?
Yeah, I mean that would be fair, and he'd be doing it younger than Vargas is, or no, about the same. Vargas 20.
I mean, is that just because Vargas stayed all year down at Fort Myers, moved up to New Britain, and has had a great year? Now, I don't think that we can expect Walker to have that type of year next year, but I mean, lower the expectations, but kind of put it on the same way. It's like, hey, especially if Vargas gets moved up, Walker knows coming out of spring training if he does similar to what Vargas does, he's got a chance to move up to AAA. He's got a chance to really move up to the major leagues at some point next year. And I would say that Vargas' year last year and obviously so far half of Walker's year this year have been pretty similar. Not a huge average, lots of strikeouts, lots of power. But I think that works, and I'd be perfectly content with him staying there. Really, I mean, you look at that roster, and I don't know that there's any single guy on that team that I would promote because they got too good for the league. I mean, there's a couple guys that I would say let's move them up to New Britain and see if they got a chance because they might be on the kind of the roster bubble right now. But even Polanco at this point, I don't see him moving up. He did hit another home run tonight. He's got 5 on the year. He's batting .281. He's kind of slowed down a little bit, but there's not a single guy on that team that I think, okay, well, he's just got to move up, not in the the batters anyway.
The Polanco thing is another cautionary tale, like we've talked about so many times. Is you can't look at 1 month and think that he's just dominated a level. You can have a good month. He's struggled in the last 6 weeks, and that's because he's 20 and in the Florida State League, and that's a tough league. It's not an offensive league. He's doing just fine, but there's no reason to promote him. I mean, I think that's what you're saying. Is right now I don't see any hitters on the Fort Myers team that are screaming for a promotion by any means.
Right. That's exactly what I was saying. We really talked a lot about Cedar Rapids when Steve was on. Why don't we talk? And we can do this kind of briefly. Let's just preview the short season rosters.
Yep. And I'm planning on writing an Elizabethton roster summary tonight. That should be at Twins Daily later tonight or early tomorrow morning. And then a Gulf Coast League roster review right after that, maybe the next day. But yeah, they took that bus ride, that overnight bus ride from Fort Myers up to Elizabethton, Tennessee, starting late last night, about 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. And they got to Elizabethton at about noon today, maybe a little bit before noon, and they're going to be busy the next couple of days. But I think they start on Thursday night, and I believe Steven Gonsalves will be the opening day starter for them. And then the Gulf Coast team starts, I believe, on Friday afternoon or Friday at noon Central Time. I think it's 11 o'clock or 1 o'clock there, but they get started on Friday. So, like I said, there's us that do those minor league reports for Twins Daily, and now we're going to be looking at 6 box scores instead of 4. So it should be a lot of fun.
As far as the Appy League roster goes, I guess some of the things that stick out to me, Derek Rodriguez making his transition to pitcher is going to do that in a league that's not always great for pitchers. And as we mentioned earlier, Mike Cederroth is going to get an opportunity in the rotation. Those are the 2 biggest things as far as pitching went. As far as the rest, nothing real shocking. A lot of the college guys that we just saw drafted, a couple of guys that spent some high school. A couple high school guys that spent some time in the GCL have now been moved up. Brian Navarretto didn't do great in the GCL, but now is moving up to the Appy League. So I think that'll be, he'll be a guy to watch. He's one of 3 catchers. Anything that really stuck out to you on that roster?
No, not a lot. I mean, there weren't a lot of surprises. Navarretto being up there was a little bit of a surprise, but not tremendously. A lot of these college relievers that we saw the Twins just draft are going to be on this roster, and really, Cederroth is the only one that's really going to get an opportunity to start, and that's typical. They want to watch these guys in their innings and things like that. Obviously, Felix Jorge is going to be down there again. He pretty well dominated Elizabethton last year. He's going to be back there because of his struggles at Cedar Rapids. But yeah, a lot of those college guys, Pat Kelly, he'll probably play a lot of second base. Blake Schmidt, the Minnesota kid as well, he'll probably play a lot of third base. Trey Vavra is probably going to be the primary first baseman. And of course, the story is going to be Nick Gordon. How he does every day is going to be interesting at short. So, not a lot of surprises, but a team that it'll be interesting to see how it plays,
Moving down to the GCL, as far as prospects go, there's really not. Minier is an outfielder, but that might be the least appealing rookie league roster that the Twins have ever had, as far back as I can remember.
Yeah, and a lot of it is because their focus most of the draft was on was on college players. So a lot of those guys are going to be at Elizabethton, and there's going to be some that trickle down into the Gulf Coast League. Minier is going to be there, and after his shoulder surgery this spring, you kind of wonder if, it says outfield, but maybe he's going to do a lot of DHing. That was one where, you would have thought maybe he'd get a chance to go up to Elizabethton if healthy, but the fact that he hasn't been able to do much this spring makes it easy for him to go to the Gulf Coast League. The other thing is guys like Lewin Diaz or Roni Tapia aren't on this roster. They're going to continue to play in the Dominican Summer League, at least at this point, as both of them are, kind of going through their ups and downs and in the Dominican Summer League. I don't have the list right in front of me, but, there's guys like, that have arms. And I think, some of those guys, the Seth Wagners and guys like that they grabbed out of high schools. And, the reality is in the GCL, there's some guys that we haven't heard of. And we'll probably like a couple of them by the end of the year, and there's a couple that will be like, how did they get on there? There's also a lot of guys that are, listed as injured as well.
Right.
But we'll get into that as well.
Lewin Diaz hasn't played in the Dominican League for almost a week, so I don't know if he's banged up or what the story is there. But I think the last time he played was like the 11th, and he's not having a great year. So I would be kind of shocked if he was, maybe he'll make a late season jump, but at this point I think he's pretty well earned his spot in that league for the rest of the season.
Yeah, and again, that's fine. I think we knew that, he has this tremendous power potential, but there were a lot of questions about his contact ability and defense and where would he play and some of the athleticism. The comparisons are to guys like David Ortiz. So, there's a lot of power and maybe not as much athleticism. So, those guys don't necessarily move up as quickly.
Do we want to move on and take some viewer questions and try to limit this to 2.5 hours?
Yeah, let's go quick. Let's give a 15-second maximum for any answers.
Okay. I don't even know how to say this. Is it a Romdi or Romdi Erickson? All day with 2K. Only questions for the night are, the first one, what do Twins do with Oswaldo Arcia struggling mighty at the plate and in the field? What do they do?
Keep playing him. He's part of the future. He's going to go through struggles. Unless they're actually going to be contending and he still hasn't figured things out, you just play him every day. Defensively, yeah, he had that really bad play on Sunday afternoon that was just bad, but I think his defense has been much better this year than we saw last year. So I just keep playing him in right field and bat him 5th, 6th, 7th, and call it good. That was only like 22 seconds.
Yeah, and I agree with you. If it gets to the point where he's not doing anything, then I would probably send him down. But I'm not going to even think about that for another month. And then maybe we talk about Eddie Rosario. So same questioner, new question. Do you guys think Phil Hughes ends up being an AL All-Star?
Yeah, I haven't taken enough time to really look at who the competition would be. I know, like we talked about, Verlander and others aren't having great years, but there are a lot of good pitchers in the American League. But as of right now, I'd find it hard to believe that he wouldn't be in the top 10 pitchers.
Yeah, I think he's got to be. And he's got to be in the All-Star game. So unless he completely blows it here in the next couple weeks, he's an All-Star.
Agreed.
I think it's going to help. Who's the? It's the Red Sox guy, right?
What?
He's the manager.
Yeah.
So here's my thinking. If I'm the Red Sox manager and I'm helping select this team, it's Gardy, his guy. That counts for something. But it's also a Red Sox guy that gets to take the former Yankee. Like, hey, Yankees, good one. We're taking your old pitcher, now he's an all-star.
Right.
So part of me does that just to kind of, jab it in a little bit, turn the knife in the wound.
Right.
So, regardless, he's been phenomenal this year. His stats speak for themselves, but if I can just get that jab in too, that's just one more reason to make that call. And I think he's an all-star. Question from Burton Hendrickson. Twins in on any exciting names for international signings?
That's yours.
Well, yeah, and I think the question came as a result of Doogie had talked to Radcliffe today, and Radcliffe basically said they're feeling good about a lot of guys, but they're not going to spend over $1 million on any guy. Which, for one thing, every year there's a handful of exciting names, and that's only if you pay a lot of attention to them. This year, there's the younger brother of the Yanoa that signed with the A's, but the Twins aren't in on any of the guys that are expected to get top 10 bonuses. There'll be a bunch more that get $1 million plus bonuses. The Twins won't be in any of those guys. But you can make $3 million go a long way if you're only spending $500,000 on some guys. And I think I think they'll probably shoot for high upside because they didn't get a lot of that opportunity in the draft. But with only, when you're limiting yourself to less than $1 million, you can't shoot too high. Short answer, I don't expect the Twins to go after any big names. So
honestly, I don't have a problem with that because how many of the big names have actually made it? Miguel Cabrera, I think back when signed for $1 million.
Right.
But he's got Lewis Thorpe for $500,000. What'd they get Arcia for? $50,000.
Yeah.
In the end, Miguel Sano got $3.15 million, and we like to think he's going to be pretty good. But Michael Inoa with the A's got like $4.5 million, and he may never get to the big leagues. So it's such a. If we think the draft is kind of a crapshoot, international signings might be even more hard to predict.
Oh, and they are because you're trying to make judgments on kids that are 14 or 15 years old.
Right.
And then you try to pull the trigger on them when they're 16. And that's the thing with these new systems is or this new international system is that you have teams and players cutting deals months before the period opens up, and then guys not even working out for teams anymore.
Right.
And it's a mess. I think that's when the international draft will come into play. But it right now is a mess. And if the Twins have guys that they like and they can get for cheaper, the correlation between talent and bonus is pretty low. And I think that's something that we spent $1.5 million on that guy. He's got to be a stud. Well, that's not always the case. So I always follow July 2nd closely because I'm interested in the team adding guys, but I'm not seeing anything huge happening unless they they decide to make a splash with some Cubans in between this time and July 2nd, but I don't know that that's going to happen either. Lars G asks, may have to ? I'm enjoying his weekly stat line, but what more does he need to prove? He's been doing this for 2.5 months now. That was a question directed at you.
Yeah, and that's I don't disagree. It's been 2.5 months. He's proven that not only does he pitch well, he's reduced his walk rate, and he's been able to go 6+ innings in most of his starts, which is something not all 5 of those guys have been able to do. So I don't think he has anything more to prove. I just think that the rotation spot that opened up may have been a little surprising. 2 or 3 starts ago, we thought Kevin Correa was on his last start, and Trevor May was lined up with him. And then Sam Meduno had 2 just terrible starts, and now he's the one that's moving. But, sure they could have had May not start on Monday, get 2 extra days rest, and come up and make a big league debut. But, again, like I said, I think it's really just a matter of time.
Right. Moving over to some questions on Twins Daily. Paul Pleiss said, will Burton still be on the 25-man when Midsummer Classic comes to town? And if not, who replaces him on the roster?
I mean, I'd say yes. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's pretty much a foregone conclusion that they don't pick up his option.
Right.
So it's for the rest of the year. Um, I think there's a few situations, the right situations, where he could be moved. If they decide that they want to go with Meyer in the bullpen, if they decide that Nick Burdi's ready, I think there's a few ways that I could see him being moved off the roster. But like you mentioned earlier, he hasn't been terrible. He had a couple really, really bad outings early in the year, and that's why his ERA is what it is. But he's got some big outs, and he's been, mediocre at best or maybe at worst, as of late. So I think he's going to hang on, like you said, because he has that track record.
Yeah, and I mean, Casey Fiend's taken over the eighth inning job. And so, I mean, he's not pitching in the eighth inning. He's getting some seventh innings, which still make you nervous, but it's not getting the eighth innings. Sure, it'd be nice to have someone that you can count on, but, I mean, has Burton been worse? Are you going to put Swarzak up in that role? Are you going to call it Michael Tonkin, who hasn't been able to get it done at the big league levels, and assume that he's going to get it done? That's where sometimes going with the veteran and trusting that track record just makes sense.
Right. Not a question, but from Mike Berardino on Twitter after I said something about John Manuel telling us that he used to date your sister. He said, "That's it. That's it. Meet me in the Park and Fly parking lot Thursday, high noon. We'll settle it there."
Nice.
So it's always fun to rib on guys when someone dates their sister. So why wouldn't you? Lightfoot ass at 10:06. Like to know what we thought of Walker's performance in the All-Star Game and Home Run Derby. I hope we answered that for him already.
Pretty good.
What will be the fallout with the 24 draftees being signed? Who will fall where? I guess I'm not exactly sure. They added another one, so they're at 25. At this point, the guys that aren't signed, they could fall in a couple different categories. The categories that they're just not going to sign. And I think, like Guthrie fits in that, high school guys that are going to college. Then you have the high school guys that are borderline guys. And what's it going to take? I think Zach Larson fit in that category. He took a bonus, almost $200,000 to sign. I think McCarthy Tatum is one of those guys. I think Tanner English, based on the conversation that we had with John earlier, that he's being re-recruited, and a lot of the things that John said made a lot of sense that I never even thought about before. But the Twins right now have about $225,000 banked up, and so they can throw up to they can throw over $300,000 at somebody to see if they'll pass up college, and it'll be interesting as we progress into the middle of July. My guess is that maybe a handful of guys still sign, but that we're not going to see anything real crazy, and that there will still be money in the pool when all is said and done.
Yeah, I mean, how's it going to play out? I mean, we'll start showing that, like I said, on Twins Daily tonight when I post rosters. Nick Burdi's just going to fit in somewhere. I mean, that's just, he's going to work. They're going to DL some guys, and some guys will get released after the year and that kind of stuff. But I agree with what you're saying. I mean, if they've got $225,000, other than those top 10 picks, you can, what is it? If you sign $100,000, it counts against that. So you could get two guys, maybe to agree to sign for $100,000, or one to go for $200,000.
100 anything over 100,000 counts to your thing. So if they have 225,000, they could hypothetically sign two guys to $200,000 contracts and only have $200,000 count $100,000 of each of those deals.
Gotcha. So I mean, I think, like you said, McCarthy Tatum's probably the high school kid that could get a bunch of that if they wanted to, and if they think he's worth it. I'm intrigued by the Orlando guys, by the Florida guys. I don't think Guthrie's signing. But Curvin Mosquite, if that's how you say it, I think would be interesting as an athletic upside guy. And then John Jones, the other guy from Florida as well. I think he's one from Orlando as well. But he might be from Miami. I'm not sure. But those are two guys that I think are those upside guys. They also took the two high school kids from Minnesota. One's a catcher, I think, in the 34th round, and a pitcher in the 33rd round or something. And those are the kind of guys maybe you would be willing to go at $150,000 to sign one of them, and that might be enough to entice them away from school.
Right.
But at that point, you're like, you know what? Here's what we can offer. If you say no, okay,
Right. The one guy that I saw, and it was just speculation that they might go after, is a high school pitcher, the Cameron Avila Leaper, who I believe is 5'10", 145.
Wow.
So he's a name that I saw. Obviously Birdie, Curtis English, and T.J. White are all high school or college juniors. The other name is the Sam Hillard, who is committed to. God, it escapes me now. He's committed somewhere in the Midwest. He's a junior college guy. He might be a guy that the Twins could go after too. But I think you're right. They could say, here, would you sign for this? If a guy says no, and like John said, area scouts are good. So I'm fairly certain that the Twins are maybe don't have the exact number, but have a range that they know. Hey, McCarthy Tatum will sign for $400,000, and maybe they offer him $350 or $325 and see what happens. But there's nothing wrong with him saying no, thanks, I'm going to Fresno. You know what I mean? Like you said. So I still anticipate that.
Wichita State, I believe.
Say that one more time.
I think Sam Hillard's going to Wichita State.
Wichita State. Yes.
So, to me, it's just let's see what happens at the end of the day. At this point, everything's just kind of gravy. You got to assume John Curtis is going to sign for a round slot. You give him a little bit extra too. But you can also make the decision on Curtis later based on what you hear from these others, because more than likely after pitching in the college season and pitching in the College World Series, I could see him just waiting and not they're not going to have him pitch for a few weeks anyway. I'd expect Birdie is, even though he's coming in for a physical later this week and he'd probably be signed by this weekend. I would not, even though he hasn't thrown a ton of innings, I wouldn't have him pitch for a while. Same thing with Curtis. So you can kind of find out where you're at on some of those other guys that you're going to have to pay a little bit extra, and maybe at the end of the day you've got $100,000 extra to give to Curtis, and it's like, here you go.
Right. Well, I don't know that it'll be that simple, but with Birdie, for me, it's like get him to Minnesota, get his physical done, sign him, send him to Fort Myers.
Yep.
Put him on some sort of throwing program or whatever it is, and just see what happens. Maybe it's in the Gulf Coast League, maybe it's for the Miracle. But he could move up fast, and I don't know. That'll be a unique thing because that's not something that the Twins have done ever, as far as I know. So,
Sean talked about the success rate for college relievers and college closers that get called up within the first year of getting drafted is not good. It's pretty bad, and you're talking arm problems constantly and lack of success. We've seen that with Detroit quite a bit. They've taken a lot of those hard-throwing relievers. Ryan Wagner was the first one I kind of thought about. So, I would still tend towards the cautious when it comes to Birdie.
Right. A couple of the questions from Lightfoot. Should Tom Shaw or Wheeler be promoted before Berrios? He says in his opinion they should be. Do we agree or disagree? Yesterday I would have agreed. Today I would disagree. I think Berrios just needs to be promoted.
I'm kind of in the same boat, and yet I know a lot of people are going to be disappointed if Wheeler or Tom Shaw or Hurlbut do get promoted ahead of Berrios. I'm not going to be disappointed, but I mean, at this point, I don't know that there's a reason not to promote him either.
Right. And then his other, not really a question, but if you've been to the Miracle website, they don't have really any video highlights. No team highlights, no anything. He says the entire All-Star game festivities are word of mouth. Not one video of one hit that weekend. Can we explain? Can you explain, Seth?
I mean, I can try. They were very good for a long time. They've done a lot of good things on their website, but I also know that a week before the season started, their second media type person took over the play-by-play radio gig for the St. Lucie Mets, which likely made a lot of things get second-guessed of whether or not they had the time to do certain things. Bryce Zimmerman does a tremendous job with the Miracle play-by-play, the pre- and post-game notes, the stories, all of that. When they had two people there to do some of those things, I think they were able to do those, Miracle insider shows and things like that. So, I mean, I think they've got a legit reason not to be, but, I mean, you're right. It would sure be nice. I always enjoyed those shows.
Yeah, they were neat, and now they're done. So, while we're all still awake, is there anything else we want to talk about?
I wanted to just kind of, if people are listening 2 hours and 48 minutes in, that's crazy, but hopefully they've broken it into a few different segments. I do want to remind people about that Cedar Rapids weekend, the Twins weekend, Friday the 27th of June and the 28th of June. Lots of stuff going on there, the jersey thing, Rod Carew being there, some of that. So check out kernels.com. I'm planning on being down there. I don't know if you're going to be able to make it, but I'm planning on being down there, and hopefully a lot of people will be able to make that trip that weekend or any weekend. It's not the same team as last year, but watching minor league ball is still pretty cool. And then when Jeremy and I are talking about some of these guys, you can say, "Oh yeah, I saw him, play a couple times." So that's one thing I mentioned. And then just again, we appreciate the questions. We got more questions this time than we've had in a while. But we'd also be curious people's thoughts on, we had John Manuel, we had Steve Boer, we've got other people on tonight. Your thoughts on guests and maybe some that you'd like us to talk about. And during the show, I got followed by Trevor May, so that was pretty exciting for me.
How does this happen? Peter Gammons, Trevor May.
I know. Wasn't there one during the show last week too?
Who was it? Was it a girl?
I don't know, maybe.
Hold on. I think I got a new follower during the show too. Bernard's Chrysler.
Perfect. All right, let's call it a show.
Trevor May. Hey, thanks for joining us tonight. It is now almost Wednesday, so this hangout almost spanned for 2 days. And if you made it this far, congratulations. You are our winners this week.
Good
one. So we'll see you next Tuesday. We'll hang out. We'll have fun. We'll talk baseball. We'll laugh. We'll cry. We'll do all those fun things together. Thanks for joining us. We will see you in a week.